welcome to episode 6 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we are joined by Gareth Paterson. Hey, Gareth.
All right, mate. How's things?
All right, thanks. All right. Now, we were contemplating how to say your name, weren't we?
Yeah, you didn't know whether you were going to introduce me as Gareth Geordie Paterson or Gareth Paterson. So anybody who knew me in the military knew me as Geordie. And now I'm out in the civvy world. I'm known as Gareth Paterson. So
There you go.
yeah, known as both.
Thanks for helping me out because,
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming on the show. It's going to be really good to listen about your experiences throughout your time in the military. And as I did in the last episode, I'm going to start this one off by 4 questions, which are going to be basically a summary of what we're going to go through in more detail. So those questions for you are, when did you join? What service and branch did you join? How long did you serve for? And what rank did you get to?
Okay. So I joined in 1994. I think you were just a glint in the milkman's eye back then, weren't you? Joined in 1994. I initially joined the Army in the Royal Armoured Corps in the Queen's Dragoon Guards as a Challenger crewman. Later on in my career, I changed across to the REME, the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. I served 24 years. I was supposed to do 25, but we'll talk about this later on. I couldn't bring myself to do the last year, and I left as a sergeant. So some people say the best rank, but I think the best rank realistically is corporal. So because you get a bit of responsibility, but if things really go bad, it's not on you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Perfect. So that is really interesting. I'm actually looking forward to hearing about the beginning part because as we go into this podcast, we became mates later on, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to hear about everything you've got to share. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up and what was that experience like?
So, yeah, my childhood was really good. I mean, I wasn't actually born in the northeast of England. So my dad was in the QDG. He was posted in Germany, in Celle, in Horne, and I was born in BMH Hanover. So my parents had everything set up where I was going to be born in England, and for the first time in my life, I was actually early.
Oh, right.
Yeah, 6 weeks early. So I was born prematurely, which meant that I was born in Germany. So after that, my dad moved back to the UK, had a variety of jobs within the army. His main job was he was test driving armoured vehicles. So he'd done all the trials and development and all the test driving for Fox, Ferret, Scimitar, MCV-80, which we now call Warrior, all of those vehicles. He then, we lived just outside ATR Pirbright for a time.
Oh, yeah.
It's all pretty grim. Cow Shot Crescent was the name of the place. My mum used to call it Cow Shit Crescent. And we then lived near Chertsey, near Woking. Lived there for a time. Then my dad was offered a job up in the northeast of England. Moved up to the northeast, and the job fell through, which was fine apart from when we moved up there. It was 1994, and it was the height of the miners' strikes. So my dad had left the army, taken a job which had fallen through, and we moved to an area. My dad just bought the house, and it was an area of 80% unemployment. So it's pretty miserable.
Do you remember that time of your life?
I remember money being really tight. So, like, presents were few and far between. I mean, my dad was trying everything he could to work. He tried everything he could to put food on the table and stuff. My mum was a seamstress, but obviously having 2 young kids, there wasn't really much she could do because obviously she had to look after me and my brother. So my dad took all sorts of odds and end jobs just to try and make ends meet and that sort of thing. And eventually, my mum and dad both went to Polytechnic, as it was back then, sort of night school and that sort of stuff. My dad got a job at Newcastle University as a technician in the Department of Marine Technology. Still works there today. My mum eventually got a job as a document controller, she's worked for different companies over the years, and she still does that. So yeah, so my parents are still living together, which is a rarity that parents are still together.
Yeah.
Still up in the northeast of England.
And so you mentioned you got up to Northeast about 94. So how old were you then? Can you remember the age?
84, I was 7.
No, was it 84?
84, yeah.
Okay, so I thought you said 94.
94 was when I joined the army.
So 84 was when you went out there.
Yeah.
And you were 6, 7.
Yeah.
And then did you have school in that area as well? Is that kind of where you
so
grew up?
I went to school at the local primary when I first got up there. I got bullied a lot because obviously growing up in the south of England, I taught proper go blimey governor, didn't I? I had a proper southern accent. And obviously being also born in Germany, I got bullied quite a bit. I mean, I remember the kids used to call me Cockney German.
Oh, really?
Which was quite funny because you're like, well, to be a Cockney, you have to be born in London, and to be a German, you have to be born in Germany. So you're basically saying I was born twice. But when you're a kid, you don't think about stuff like that. You just, I was. So I got bullied quite a bit, but I still had my friends and stuff like that I used to hang about with. Most of my childhood was sort of just hanging around. I was quite lucky. We had quite a big park. Well, still there. There was quite a big park just up the top of the street from my parents, and spent most of my childhood just being a typical kid, climbing trees, playing army, playing wars, and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So lucky that I had a brother. My brother's 2 years younger than us. So we were quite close, but it was one of those things where it was sibling rivalry. So the whole time was me and him just fighting. And then as soon as my mum shouted at one of us two, then the other one would jump to the other brother's aid. And my mum would just be into a blazing argument with the pair of us. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that was, so childhood was pretty much, average. There wasn't anything major that happened.
Cool. So like you say, normal childhood. Any sports or anything that you were into, or any clubs that you were part of that you remember?
So I done karate for a couple of years, which I enjoyed.
Do you remember what belt you got to?
Green belt, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got. So initially I done Wadaroo, got to green belt in that, and then I stopped doing Wadaroo and moved on to Chojinkai. This has gone back some years, I tell you.
There you go.
And I remember going for my grading, and they never gave out. They used to put a mark in your license book for your grading, whether it was a weak pass, an average pass, or a strong pass. And they said they never gave out strong passes. And I got a strong pass, which I was absolutely made up getting that. So, but the problem is with the money being tight. I've never been good at your average sports.
No.
Right. Football, I mean, I could have a clear goal in front of us, right? No goalie. And all I have to do is literally tip the ball in to score a goal, and the ball will go right over the bars, or like literally I'd like chip it off somewhere else. Like I was crap at the normal sports.
The weird thing is you sound very much like me as a kid. So I actually played football at school, not very well, and there was an open goal, and I kicked it and I missed.
Yeah, well, because I wasn't very good at it, didn't mean I didn't have to do it when I was at school.
Yeah.
So, always the last to get picked. Didn't have particularly good hand-to-eye coordination, that sort of stuff. So, but I was always good at the sports that you didn't normally get the chance to try. So, rock climbing, and things like that. So, which later on in my career, in my army career, I got to spend a lot of time doing.
Nice.
So, I mean, there was sports that I'm good at and I was good at, but it's not the normal ones. So,
Okay.
And obviously being a kid who wasn't into football up in the northeast, people thought I was like an alien. They were like, what is wrong with you?
So going from childhood, I suppose, into adulthood.
Yeah.
Any point there that you knew that you wanted to join the military? Obviously, your dad was in, so was that what enticed you?
My whole family are a military-orientated family. I mean, I think in definitely the last 5 generations, the males have joined the military. And out of my generation, there's 4 males, and 3 of them have all been military. So me, my brother, and my cousin all joined the army. My other cousin wanted to join the army, but he was diagnosed with arthritis when he was young, so he couldn't. So he joined. He eventually got jobs working at Jaguar Land Rover, building the Land Rovers that we used to drive.
Yeah, drive.
So yeah. So, and I mean, growing up in the northeast in the time that I did, I knew that there wasn't much in the way of industry, careers, and that sort of stuff.
Right.
So I thought, do you know what? Especially when at 15 years old, I was like, there's nothing here. There's nothing in the northeast. So I pretty much, initially I wanted to join as an officer.
Okay.
So I applied for Welbeck. Everything went swimmingly until they received a letter from the reference from my head of year. So me and my head of year had a bit of a to-do. It was all to do with my best friend. So my best friend had a party, right, for his 16th. I think it was his 16th. And it was just basically him, a few friends, and pizzas, a movie, and a couple of beers, right, at his house. She found out about this, because obviously some people were talking about it, and right in the middle of this, bearing in mind his parents were there as well, in the middle of this, there's a knock on the door and there's the police car start charging in. And it turns out it was a drug raid, right? Because this teacher had assumed that there was going to be underage drinking, drugs, this, that, and the other. So when I went into school that was on the Friday, when I went to school the following Monday, being a gobby little flipping teenager that I was, because obviously when you're that age, you know everything, I gobbed off at her. So when it came to my reference being sent to Welbeck College, she said that I wasn't good with authority, I was a troublemaker, this, that, and the other. So I got a letter back from Welbeck saying, thanks, but no thanks. To which my dad wasn't happy. My dad actually went into the school and had a bit of a pop at her. So at that point, I was basically, right, okay, well, let's just do as my dad done. Let's join as a soldier. So after I've met officers, I'm pleased I did, because in my experience, officers are really good guys and they're very intelligent, but they're lacking in the common sense department. So yeah, definitely.
I'm not going to comment on that, but so you wanted to join. Do you remember joining? Do you remember which career office you went to? That kind of stuff.
South Shields career office. Yeah. So I remember going down, and it was during my GCSEs as well. So it was a case of I'd finish my GCSEs, I'd take my school blazer and school tie off, I'd put another jacket on, put another tie on, get on the bus, drive down to the careers office, have interviews, and I'd done that quite a bit. And then obviously I went and done selection up in Glencorse in Scotland.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. So
is that where all the north?
Yeah, north of England all go to Glencorse in Scotland.
Got it. Okay.
And yeah, I remember that being because that's your first proper look at the army, and that being sort of a bit of a shock to the system, but got accepted. So as of that point, it was right. Okay, you've got a job. So came back, and I remember it was a sunny day, and I remember Mum was sat on the front step of the house, and I literally sprinted down the street shouting, "I've got the job." So my mum was over the moon for us.
Nice.
And then so that was the sort of careers office thing, all that sort of stuff. And then basic training started. I finished school, I think it was the Thursday I finished school, and I think I was in basic training the following Monday.
Really?
Yeah, it was quick.
Wow.
Right, it was because one of the things I definitely remember is getting my GCSE results over the telephone. Now, bear in mind, this is like 1994, so there's no such thing as mobile phones or anything like that. So if you wanted to call your family, you had to wait in the queue outside the telephone box, waiting for people to flip in, finish on the call. And I remember I rang my mum and she said, I've got your GCSE results. And I went, fantastic, what are they? And she went, well, at least you've got a job. I was like, oh, they're that good then. And, and looking at them, it was because there was, it was kind of, I just had my heart set on joining the army, things like that. And if I was honest, I didn't apply myself at school.
Okay.
Especially during my exams, I was like, yeah. So a little bit. It was a lot of too little, too much. Too little, too late.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
By this time, do you know what cap badge you're going to be joining and stuff?
Yeah. So I said I wanted to join the Royal Armoured Corps.
Okay.
Particularly because that's what my dad was in. My dad was an ex-tank crewman, so I wanted to do tanks because I grew up around tank. My dad doing armoured vehicles as well. So, and I loved sort of big, heavy armoured vehicles, big guns, that sort of stuff. So I remember back in '94 when you got to ATR, I went through ATR Winchester.
Okay.
And once you got there, you basically had an interview with a brigadier who was like, right, okay, this is going to be your cap badge. And they tried putting me into the Light Dragoons. And I said, no, I want Queen's Dragoon Guards. And he went, but they're Welsh. And I was like, yeah, but I want the QDG. And he went, well, you've got no connection with the QDG. I said, my dad was in the QDG. And he was like, was he? So he went off, come back, and he went, right, okay. He said, you have a choice. You can either go Light Dragoons, which is your local regiment, or you can go QDG, which is obviously Welsh, but it's a family regiment. So I decided that I would go for QDG. Also, the fact that Light Dragoons were on CVRT at the time and QDG were on Challenger. And I was like, you give me a choice of a flipping Tonka toy or a proper toy. I was like, no, I'm going for the proper toy. So, so after finishing basic training in Winchester, which was quite a big eye opener
for you,
for me, yeah. So my parents, when they found out I was joining as a soldier, my parents thought I would only last a year.
Okay,
right? Possibly do the 4 years, but they were like, he's not going to do a full career. Because, to be honest, as a child, I was a little bit wet, little bit wet, a little bit naive, rather not make life too hard for myself, that sort of stuff. Even if I do see it so myself, I mean, I was wet. And basic training sort of proved to me that I could do a lot more if I applied myself, and I could sort of surpass my own expectations. Mm-hmm. So... so after that, I went to Bovington, to the armoured training school. Yeah. And that was quite I think the Monday I started driving a car. I started my car lessons. I passed my car licence on the Friday. The following Monday, I started driving CVRTs. And then that built up over the next few weeks. So... over the course of, it was 10 weeks phase 2 training, and over the 10 weeks of phase 2 training, I went from never driving before to car license, CVRT, tank. So,
and what age are you now?
I was 17 now, because I just clicked over in the September when I was in basic. Was I in basic? Yeah, so the September.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you signed on at 16?
Yes. And I was literally just on the border, so I was 16 and 9 months.
Oh, okay. Which is close to mine as well. That's weird. When did you sign on? What date? Was that September?
No, I signed on in the July.
July of 94?
Of 94.
Okay, and that kind of makes sense with getting your results. Yeah, cool. And then you was 17, learning everything to drive a vehicle, and then you were driving tanks. And with me being a driver from the engineers, very similar to me, never driven, car and trailer, truck.
But also with the driving test was, I remember it was in a Ford Fiesta, but this is back in the time where traction control, ABS, and power steering wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So it was like, I remember the guy who right, where now they tell you, right, okay, turn the steering wheel, so on full lock, now pull forward. Back at the time, you couldn't do that. What you had to do was you had to be rolling so you could get the steering wheel round. Otherwise, you had to have muscles like Garth to get the steering round.
That's why 3-point turns were hard.
Yeah, exactly. 3-point turns were nails.
Yeah, awesome. So you're now driving tanks. But what I'd love you to do is just talk, not in too much depth, but just a little bit about what it is going through your phase 2. Because as an engineer, I'm not armoured engineer.
Yeah.
They do tanks and stuff. But I've never really driven a tank apart from the odd occasion. So it'd be great to hear what that's like.
You start off, when you first, it may have changed now, but when you first started, the lowest rank on a tank was the tank driver, and he was the onboard mechanic. So when I first turned up, I was expecting, like, this will be your tank. You just spend your time driving cross country. It'll be cool all day, and that's it, right? No, for the first bit of it, after get my license, was sat staring at a tank engine in a freezing cold hangar and learning how this engine worked, right? Wow. Having to know the flow of the oil and how the fuel worked and how to service it and how to look after it and things like that. Because as the driver, and I don't think I quite realised the responsibility, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of new, like, young kids who started as tank drivers didn't quite understand the responsibility of, you're there to make sure that tank moves and that tank can fight. Because if the engine's not running, you don't have any power, you don't have any movement, you're just basically a sitting duck, which for a crew of 4 people, you've got the responsibility of those 4 people. So I definitely didn't click with that at all. So I was sat there staring at this engine going, what the hell do I need to know this for? But that was called, the phase was called D&M, driving and maintenance. So got through the D&M phase, learned to drive cross country and things like that. And then the training finished in December. I had Christmas at home, and then the start of January, I was on a flight out to Paderborn. And I was posted to Athlone Barracks in Sennelager.
First posting.
So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, basically it was a hangover for the better part of 6 years. So I was drunk. I mean, the army has completely changed now. You cannot do this even closely. But it was a huge drinking culture when I first joined. So, for example, my first exercise on a tank, you harboured up at the end of the day, and the SQMS would drive through with his wagon, and you would buy crates of Becks, bottles of Baileys. Like, 90% of the time I drove my Challenger tank on exercise, I was drunk. I was not sober, right? Because at night you were drinking beer, and then during the day you would be handed a cup of coffee, and instead of milk it would have Baileys in it, and it was called a special coffee in a little thermos mug, because you can drive a tank one-handed. So I was literally drunk for the whole time I was driving Challenger tanks.
Bloody hell.
And you're thinking 62 tons of steel rolling down the road at flipping 32 miles an hour. And the 17-year-old that's driving it is absolutely paralytic. So yeah, things changed considerably throughout the army when they got rid of the whole drinking culture and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I tell people that I was drunk for the first time, for the first few years I was driving tanks, and they're like, nah. And I'm like, yeah.
I suppose the good thing is, you might have driven on the roads, but Sennelager is pretty big, so the training.
Well, the thing is, from Athlone Barracks, you drove out the back gate, hung a left, you were instantly on the training area.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't like I was driving public roads absolutely paralytic.
No.
So it was range.
That's worth stating to anybody listening, because if they've never been to Germany and never seen our training area down in Sennelager, it's huge, and you are definitely away from. Yeah,
you're away from. I wasn't like I was driving Challenger tanks drunk down the high street of Paderborn,
or going through McDonald's.
I seen somebody go through a McDonald's in a CBRT.
Oh my god!
So,
but I know what you mean. My first posting was Germany, Hamel.
Okay.
So, yeah. It's time to drink, right? It's a culture that's been embedded in the military for many, many years.
Well, BAOR, British Army of the Rhine, and it was just literally post-war, once you got posted to Germany, you suddenly realised you're still doing the celebrations from the end of the war. That's basically all it is.
Absolutely.
And everybody's and it was a huge drinking culture.
Yeah.
So I would finish a typical work week on the tanks was in barracks. Was you'd turn up on a Monday morning, you'd have your Monday morning parade. Normally got sent to jail and got beasted by the provost staff, and got thrashed for something really like trivial, like your creases weren't ironed in enough, and you're like, but you can see them. Their creases, the creases are there. No, they're not in enough, right? Or the other one was, so you remember lightweights, the green lightweights, and if you iron them too much, they went sort of sheen and silvery,
especially with starch.
Right? And and they used to go, your lightweights are two-tone. Go to jail. You're like, what?
Also, I was going to say, you joined Germany when it was still Deutschmarks as well, right?
It was Deutschmarks, yeah.
So that's the old days when it was.
Oh man, it was.
And Becks were 50 cents.
50, less than 50 cents.
Yeah, they're 20. No, they were 25. Was it cents for Deutschmarks?
Yes.
And it still was cents for euros.
No, it wasn't.
Right?
No, it was Pfennings.
Pfennings. That's it. Yeah. They were like 25 because it was half, like 25 Pfennings for a bottle of Becks.
Yeah, but you could buy a crate of Becks for like 5 Deutschmarks, which was at the time was like £2.
It's crazy.
And it was a crate of 24 Becks.
Yeah. So going back to ironing your kit, it's difficult after you've had 3 days of drinking the cheapest beer, but you get used to it.
Yeah. The other thing that I missed from all of that is fuel coupons as well.
Fuel coupons, yeah. There were different colours for the different types of fuel you had, and
so I used to have the red fuel coupons, and used to go super.
Yeah,
that's it, super. Because my car, my first car was a Vauxhall Astra, and I bought it from one of the PTI's wives.
Oh yeah,
right. And I bought that absolutely. I ended up when I traded up to get a new car, I actually gave that car to my brother because throughout all of this going on, my brother left school and joined the army as well, and he joined the same regiment.
Ah, right.
So my brother turned up sort of 2 years after me.
Did they do that for you as a family, or did it get requested?
No, it's what he wanted to do. He wanted to join the QDG. What is quite funny though is because I sold the world to him, right? Because he was 16 and his big brother had gone, no, it's amazing, right? And he got there and he absolutely hated it.
Oh no,
hated it. And I remember one day I went in. One of the guys comes around to my room and's like, your brother's not happy. And I was like, right, okay. So walks in like the typical 18-year-old big brother, like, what's all this drama? And he went, you bastard. And he picked up the ironing board and whacked me with it, right? Proper trolleyed me with this ironing board. That then just turned into a brotherly fight in the block. Me and my brother got into a few ruckuses between each other because he wasn't happy.
Right.
But he eventually settled in and actually enjoyed doing the job. It was just because I think, to be honest, it was what I'd sold him wasn't quite what he got.
Yeah.
So it was little bits he did.
Bits.
Yeah, I didn't tell him about the bad bits.
And what's it like having your brother in the same regiment? Because the only people that I know that have that is in Saving Private Ryan.
So yeah, it was good. I mean, for having your brother constantly there and things like that, I enjoyed. He had his life, I had my life. He had his friends, I had my friends. So we didn't really interact that much. He was in a different squadron to me.
Okay.
So obviously when we deployed together, I'd know what troop he was in and what his troop were up to and things like that. So, for example, in Northern Ireland, when it kicked off, it was a case of I wasn't constantly worrying about it, but it would just be I hope he's okay. But other than that, I mean, it was a case of I knew the guys that my brother was with were really good. They knew that he was good, and it was a case I knew that he was being looked after because evidently at the end of the day in the army, that's what we do. We look after each other.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, it was. I wouldn't say it was a burden or anything like that.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So there you've mentioned Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So I think that ties in nicely with kind of tours and trips away that you've done in your first unit.
Yep.
Well, in fact, is it the first unit? Do you guys move around? Because
no, so
you stay in one...
unlike corps. So obviously, for people who don't know this about the army, is if you join a regiment, then you are assigned to that regiment and you will stay with that regiment. So wherever the regiment go, you will go. If you join a corps, then, so for example, the REME, the engineers, the RLC, you will get posted every sort of 2 years. So if, for example, when I was in the REME, I moved every 2.5 years, you were probably the same.
Yes.
In a regiment, you get posted and you stay with that unit. So, for example, I know, one of the guys I joined the QDGs with as a trooper, the lowest rank in the unit, also one of the coolest rank names in the world, trooper.
Yeah.
He later on became the regimental sergeant major of the QDGs.
Okay.
So in fact, there's two that done that. So so you don't move around. If the regiment moves as a regiment, so we done a move from Sennelager to Catterick, the entire unit, families, everybody, kids, all up, move as a bulk and then drop off in Catterick.
Yeah, and it's worth stating that because, you know, typically Royal Engineers, you really focus on Royal Engineers. You might work alongside some other units, but you don't really know the ins and outs of it. So it's good to know that is how it is. So once you join, you stay as a family for 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might be. So with that, we know that you aren't getting posted to different locations apart from the whole family moving.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the trips away that you've done. Was your first trip away Northern Ireland, or did you have something before that?
No. So I done Canada. We've got a massive. You've done Battis.
I haven't.
You haven't done Battis. So you should actually have a. You know, they gave out a medal for people who avoided Battis. So So Battis is in Alberta in Canada. Biggest training area the British Army's got. It's the size of Wales. Absolutely humongous, and it's a awesome place. Not only for the training value and being able to get out. I mean, that was the first time I'd ever properly left the UK. I mean, I'd done a couple of holidays with my parents to the south of France and stuff. But I mean, this is like the first time I'd properly deployed anywhere with the army, and gone abroad in a sort of en masse. So a whole battle group goes out to Canada. You have 2 weeks in camp in what's called Battis.
Do you remember what that stands for?
British Army Training Unit Suffield.
That sounds good.
Hey, that sounds good. No, that's what it is.
It is that. Yeah, no, that is.
And you deploy out onto the prairie, and literally it's live firing, so the tanks can all fire live. You get to see all the infantry firing their javelins and anti-tank stuff. You can do all of the stuff out there, and then you move into an exercise phase. So all the weapons are then cleared, and you move into an exercise phase, which was normally TESX. So it's basically laser quest for tanks and vehicles and stuff like that. Because I remember we were out there and we were getting our asses handed to us by the enemy, right? We were getting hammered. And I remember sitting there in this valley on my tank, because once you've been killed, you had to stay static until you were called to the holding area. And the sergeant major was in a Spartan. Now, a Spartan armored vehicle is basically a box with tracks. It's got a tiny machine gun on the top, and then that's it. It's meant as basically a command vehicle or a recce vehicle. And he's on the top, and we can see him on the brow on the ridge of this hill, and he goes, hello, Zero's command. He's like, this is 3-3, so the sergeant major. He says, I can see 1, no wait, 3. Holy shit, there's loads of them withdrawing, and you just see this vehicle. Now, it's got a transfer box. So it's got 7 forward gears. If you bung the transfer box into reverse, you can have 7 reverse gears. So it goes backwards as quick as it goes forwards. And this CVRT is going flat out in 7th gear, cross country, like that, as you see all these enemy come up over the hill. It was absolutely brilliant to watch. So yeah, I think he lasted probably about flipping the better part of a mile, and then he got hammered.
That sounds cool.
But yeah, Battis was really, really good. And especially in the Armoured Corps, you do Armoured Corps and REME especially, you do quite a few exercises in Battis. So that became a place I knew quite well and quite close to my heart.
And I'm guessing you did summer and winter times out there?
Yeah, so summer and winter. Winter out there was brutal. I mean, Canada, for those who haven't been to sort of that neck of the woods, you can go around from walking around in flip-flops, board shorts and a T-shirt on the Monday, and by the Friday, it's minus 35 and you're walking around up to your knee and up to your waist in snow, and it's freezing cold. So the weather changes and it's complete polar opposites. So I think they stopped doing winter exercises out there and just moved it onto winter maintenance. So basically what would happen is the REME would go out there and do all the maintenance on all the vehicles over that stand down period, purely because it was just like, you've got people, if you didn't have gloves on when you picked your rifle up, your hands would physically stick to the metal on your rifle and things like that. So it was just more hassle than what it was worth.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Battis was, I really enjoyed Battis, especially the training at the end. So the adventure training.
Okay.
Got to go rock climbing and stuff like that. Was awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that that's what you did at school a little bit, wasn't it?
So that's where I got the first taste for it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have the ability to do that when I was a child properly until I joined. So I started getting into rock climbing probably, when are we? Yeah, probably 96, 97. I started getting into it, and my brother got into it as well.
Okay.
So the two of us spent a lot of time climbing. I mean, summer leave, so you get 2 weeks off at summer, would usually consist of me and my brother. We had all our own kit and equipment as well. So we'd go home on leave, spend like a day or two with my parents, and then the rest of the time we'd sod off around the north of England, along the border of Scotland and stuff climbing. So, which was good. So got to do, there was a climb called Psycho, which was a really, really, it was only 20 feet, and it was a really, really hard climb. And me and my brother spent the entire summer training to do it. So, which we managed to get done, I think, on the last day.
Where was that?
So that's Otley, so not far from Wetherby.
Okay.
So Harrogate area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going back some years. But then, so obviously Canada was the first time I'd gone anywhere properly with the army, apart from obviously being posted in Paderborn. And then my first op tour, I actually volunteered for.
Okay.
So the way the army worked back then was it was prior to computer systems and everything being sent by email and stuff like that. So at the end of every working day, you would have to go into the squadron office and read squadron orders. So, and they were printed off, put on the board, and you'd have to sit there and read them. And the sergeant major would always have his door open, because then he could click who was coming in regularly to read orders and who was the people that never read orders and stuff like that. And I turned out I was reading orders. And what was his name? Evans. I can't remember his first name, but Sergeant Major Evans. And he went, "Geordie, do you want to do an op tour?" And I was like, "Yeah." "When?" And he was like, "Northern Ireland." He said, "They're deploying in a few months." I was like, "Oh, okay." He said, "Right, tomorrow morning, get yourself down to D Squadron, and you want to speak to Mon's troop, and you're going to go out on deployment with them." So, that one conversation, just throwaway conversation, yeah, all right, got me 6 months in Northern Ireland. So I went through all the training, which was quite a big learning curve, especially at like flipping at my age. And then flew out to Northern Ireland in the September. We went to Girdwood Camp, which is literally, it's not there now, it was in the centre of Belfast. And that was mainly to patrol a heavily nationalist area called the New Lodge. So literally, if you went in there, you were going to have trouble. So pretty much every patrol and things like that, sort of, it kicked off.
What year is this?
90. No, I always get my dates mixed up. So 97. No, September 96. What year was Canary Wharf bomb?
I don't know.
Oh, I can't remember.
So 96 or 97?
Yeah, because...
Well, you joined in 94. Year training.
Yeah.
Takes us to 95. You've been to Canada.
Yeah, so
96.
97.
So 97 would have been...
So we're talking end of 96, start of 97. Because I remember I was in Girdwood and I was on stag in the towers, right? So on lookout. And for those who don't know what stag means.
Yeah.
And it was, the ceasefire had been in for a time and stuff like that. The ceasefire between the British government and the IRA. I remember that my rifle, I didn't even have my rifle on us, right? My rifle was in the corner of the tower. And I wasn't wearing my berry, and I was playing electronic chess, right? Where you used to do your move and then it would light up which one you wanted you to move and put it where, right? And I was playing electronic chess and we had an intercom system.
Okay.
And the intercom system pipes up, and it was the guy in the guard room. Now, they were forever playing practical jokes. So it pipes up with, Geordie, just keep your head down. The IRA have blown up London and the ceasefire's gone down the pan. I was like, fuck off, mate. I'm not going to fall for that. And then it beeps again. And he's like, no, I'm serious. The ceasefire's gone. He says it's going to kick off. I was like, sod off, mate. Just ignored it. And then about 20 minutes later, there's a guy stood out the front of my Sanger and he shouts, I bet you're fucking shitting yourselves now, aren't you? I was like, okay. Chest away. Make sure I got my helmet on. Rifle, I put a round in the chamber, and I was like, no fuckers coming anywhere near me tonight. And literally from that moment, Belfast went mental. And it just went absolutely crazy for about 6 months afterwards. So the attacks went through the roof, the petrol bombings went through the roof, the mortaring went through the roof. It just was absolutely silly, and there was a massive surge. So what they done was they moved a load of soldiers who were on standby from the UK into Northern Ireland just to bolster the number of troops out there. So we moved from Girdwood in the centre to West Belfast. Now, during the Troubles, West Belfast is like the main hub of the IRA. West Belfast was the area that the IRA sort of owned. And right out on the side, on the edges of it, on the edge of the Mourne Mountains is, it's not there anymore, a camp called Fort White Rock. Some of the guys used to call it Fraggle Rock. And it was basically a big military camp out to the side, away from pretty much anything. So it was a case of if anything approached, you could see it. And that's where I was moved to. And all of our patrols then moved into an area called the Turf Lodge, which was heavily IRA orientated and stuff like that. So, so that the rest of that tour was just absolute bedlam, absolutely crazy, massive riots. So I've actually got a picture of me after one of the riots where I've climbed into the back of a snatch Land Rover, just shut the back doors, and one of the guys have taken the picture of us, and it's me fast asleep, just cradling my rifle because I was knackered.
Yeah.
The riots were an eye opener, but yeah, I have to admit I enjoyed it when the riots proper kicked off and you got to get in and actually just getting amongst it. I really enjoyed them.
Did you have things like riot shields then?
So I was a baton gunner. So
Okay.
so I had the baton gun, had the riot shields, had the ash poles, and they used to obviously take you through all the training of where you could and couldn't hit on people. So you had red areas, amber areas, and green areas. So if it's a green area, hit it till your heart's content. So flesh areas like thighs, backside, stuff like that. Amber areas were places that you could hit, but you're not really supposed to. So knee joints, elbows, that sort of stuff. And then red areas were places where it's a no-no. So your head, groin were the two main red areas. So yeah, the riots were pretty full on, because you can imagine they would just do anything they could just to kick off and riot. And they'd set fire to, they'd block roads and then set fire to the car that they put in the middle of the road, burn everything, burn rubber just so it smoked the street out and things like that.
So before you went out there, you mentioned you had a couple of months to get prepared.
Yeah.
Did you go through all this training before you even went out
Yeah.
there?
They don't just send you out there and just say, oh yeah, if there's a riot, you'll have to deal with it.
No, but because the peacetime had been agreed, I just wondered if it was like, this might happen, but probably not, because we've got...
It's like everything that we've done in the army. We always prepared for the worst, trained for the worst, hope for the best.
Okay.
So we've done considerable amounts of riot training, considerable amounts of public order, and that sort of stuff. So it was, we knew what we were doing and how to deal with it. So one of the most unnerving things I'd ever come across was when I actually met an active member of the IRA. So because you'd have to go in for briefings, and you'd sit there and they'd show you a picture of someone and then say, right, this is such and such, blah, blah, blah. And this is where he lives, all the rest of it. So because they were known as players. So if you met a player in the street, you had to stop and search them. And I remember the first time I met a known IRA active player. And I remember, I was only like 19 at the time. I was absolutely papping myself, because this guy had actually been done for attacking and trying to blow up and shoot at flipping British forces. So it was like, bloody hell, a real terrorist, which is something like I wasn't not expecting. But yeah, that tour opened my eyes quite a bit, especially going from sort of the relatively sort of average growing up life and things like that, and then being on the piss all the time in Germany. I'd never actually come across anything where it was proper fighting and proper operations. And then obviously I'm there, and then it's like, wow, okay. And now I've got a known terrorist stood 5 feet away from us.
Yeah.
So
Did you inspect him, or did he run away?
no, he didn't get much of a choice. So
Right.
basically, you had to go through this whole palaver and this whole speech with him and all the rest of it. Then you would search him and stuff like that. They knew the game better than we did. They knew. So they had stashes and hides all over the place. So you would never really, unless there was an active shoot. So somebody had fired at the British forces and you were in hot pursuit and you were trying to catch that person. You'd never catch them with weapons and things like that. So, and I mean, some of the stuff that they done was whenever so the people used to refer to the IRA as being thick, right? Or the Irish as being thick, right? And whenever we came up with a piece of equipment to bypass their way of attacking us, they would come up with a way to counter against it. And some of the stuff was like very, very, very simple, but very clever. So remote detonated bombs, we had all the kit on our back.
Yeah, the Chubb,
So,
wasn't it?
No, this is prior to that.
Prior to Chubb.
Yeah, so this is, you had Antler, you
really?
had great brown sifter and white sifter. And then you had Violet Joker, which was the one that sat on your chest. And it just went off like, ew, the whole time.
Oh, right.
So you'd be patrolling along, ew, and everybody just like stop, because that would pick up the signal. But then the IRA worked out that in your car in the 90s, you could buy a device that picked up if there were speed cameras.
Oh yeah.
But that would also set off our violet jokers as well. So the IRA clicked off with that as well. But like simple bypasses, like they would make a coffee jar bomb, and then they would attach a bit of string from the coffee jar bomb, put it on a high wall, bit of string going across, right, to a nail on the other wall. Anybody can cross underneath it, but they knew that we'd walk under it, and because we had antennas on our stuff, the antenna would drag the coffee jar bomb off, and that would go up. The simplest thing in the world, right? And it would only realistically target soldiers unless you had a 9-foot tall woman walking through the thing.
Yeah.
So, so that tour, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that tour. It was a massive eye opener.
Yeah.
So, that was my first.
And you were quite young then, weren't you? So you're still a teenager, aren't you?
Yeah, I was 19.
19, yeah. And I think potentially, because we are that young when we do our first tours, there's that chance that being naive helps, because then you then you can enjoy it. And
absolutely.
You don't realise, I suppose, what actual danger you're in. Like my first tour was Afghanistan. And again, that was my favourite tour. But when you look back, you were like, that was the most dangerous time. So yeah, same with you. It sounds like that for Northern Ireland. So you come back from there. That's 97 by now, isn't it? And then do you do a bit more?
Do you know what? It must have been, no, it was 96. It was definitely,
96?
So it was 95, 96, because that was prior to me going to Bosnia, and I went to Bosnia in 96.
Oh, okay. So Northern Ireland is 95, 96.
Yeah, so September 95 to 1996.
And then your next tour is Bosnia.
And then my next tour was Bosnia in 1996 as well.
Cool.
So,
okay. What was that like? So again, I missed Bosnia by a few months from my unit going out. So can you share anything there?
I remember, so the squadron I was with, I was with B Squadron in the QDG, and we weren't going out on the tanks like the rest of the regiment, because our squadron had been seconded to the Royal Green Jackets. So we were going out there as armoured infantry on what's commonly called the combat taxi, which is a Saxon. So you remember the Saxon?
Yes, I do, yeah.
So basically they're just a big oversized truck. And we went out to Gorny Vakuf, which is in an enclave basically in the mountains. And one of the things I always remember about that tour is just how gorgeous the country is. Like, Bosnia was stunning.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. But it was completely war-torn. And we were patrolling through Gorny Vakuf. And Gorny Vakuf itself was on the front line. So you've got to remember, this is the Serbs and the Croats who were up against each other. And it was literally, you could basically patrol down the street and see where the front line was. You could go to the left of it and there wasn't much in the way of damage. Go to the right of it, wasn't much in the damage. Walk down the front line and the street was just destroyed.
Wow.
And I mean, they do things like they'd sit there and if they lived in a block of flats, and like before you go to sleep, they'd spray a mag into the ceiling because the guy above him was a flipping Croat, and the guy above would spray a mag into the floor because the bloke below him was a Serb. So it was just absolutely, like, that was the first time I'd seen war. And obviously there was the mass genocide as well out there as well. So, the actual details of that tour, I don't actually remember.
Okay.
I don't remember much in the way of details. I remember that the country was stunning. I remember that it was a good tour. I came back early actually because I went on my gunnery course for my Challenger. But that tour itself in Bosnia was, I remember that being a sort of a quite an eye opener, because that was it let you realise just how evil people can be, especially with the whole mass graves and stuff like that. But Yeah, because I still had. You remember I talked about the Vauxhall Astra being my first car?
Yeah.
I remember ringing home and my dad saying, "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" I was like, "What's the bad news?" And he went, "Somebody stole your car." I was like, "What?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I drove it into Newcastle." He says, "Parked it up." He said, and he says, "The first thing I knew about it was I got a phone call from the police." He says, "I went back to the car. The car wasn't there." He says, "I come home." He says, "And I got a phone call from the police." He said, "The good news is we've got it back." I was like, "Right," because apparently somebody had seen these people breaking into the car and then called the police. So I can't remember whether they caught them or not. But yeah, so my car, we're talking, this is like a 1989 Vauxhall Astra. So it gone through all the insurance and stuff, been repaired. And I'm looking at my dad sent me a picture of the car and I'm sat there looking at it going, there's something wrong. And I said to my dad, I was like, the shade of the door's different to the rest of the car. And he went, it's not. He says, it's exactly the same colour and exactly the same shade. And I went, well, why does it look wrong? He says, because the rest of the car is all pitted and old and knackered. He says, and you've got a nice new door. I was like, oh, right, okay. So the door was probably worth more than the rest of the car put together, to be honest. But yeah, that tour finished early. Like I say, we were out there on foot. With as infantry, and then that tour finished early, or I finished that tour early because I came back to do my gunnery course to learn how to be a gunner on the Challenger tanks.
Okay.
So,
And that's a step up from
driver, yeah.
driver.
So that's the next step up, which I really enjoyed gunning tanks. So
nice.
Um,
So that course is that in the UK or is that
so
in
that
Germany?
that started off in Germany. So all the sort of theory and all that sort of stuff started off in Germany, and then when you come on to the actual assessment and testing phase, you go down to Lulworth Cove on the south coast of England, in Dorset, and there's basically is the gunnery school down there, the Armoured Gunnery School, and that's where you go when you get assessed. So they'll take you and they'll basically put you through your paces and assess you and test you on how well you are, how good you are, and have you picked it up. So I remember that being not an easy course.
Okay.
So like I say, I wasn't massively academic, or it was more through I didn't want to be academic more than anything.
More hands-on.
So I wanted to be hands-on. But yeah, that course, I mean, the stuff that you have to do at the time in a Challenger tank. So when you were sat in the gunner's seat, your left foot, let's get this right, your left foot controlled the radio, your right foot controlled the machine gun, your left hand, this finger done your ammunition selection, that finger fired, your thumb switched between the coax machine gun and the main armament, your right hand controlled the turret. Your left eye, you had your graticle. No, your left eye had your range readout and your ammo selection. Your right eye had the graticle, so your sight picture with the target and then all your details. So basically, it was just sat in a chair going like that.
Blimey.
So, but yeah, that was really good. And the Challenger had later versions of the Chieftain, the predecessor of the Challenger, had the laser system, which was then brought across onto the Challenger. So it was all laser aligned, and you had an onboard computer processing unit. I mean, back in the 90s, this was like cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
So you lasered the target and then pressed what was called auto lay, and it would automatically lay the gun at the correct elevation to hit the target. So all the mathematics side of it and things like that. I mean, prior to that, they had a Browning machine gun. A Browning 303 gun. So on the top, where that was called the Chieftain was called Polite Tank, because you had to get 3 direct hits with this ranging gun before you fired the main armament. So they said it was a polite tank because it knocked before it came in. Because if you heard dum dum dum, get out quick because the next one's going to be a big one.
Wow. Yeah.
So gunning the Challenger tank, I really enjoyed. Then we came back and we done another Battus.
Before you do that, you said that going from driver to gunner is like a promotion type thing. So do you actually get a rank promotion when you do that?
You don't get a rank promotion, but if I remember rightly, you got a pay rise.
Okay.
Because you got gunner pay. And you also got to iron what was called a gunner's crease. And there's a crease between the shoulders that you ironed across horizontally. So
right.
Basically, the way people were dressed on the tank park in their coveralls, you could tell what they used to do on the tank park. So as a driver, you looked as though you'd been dunked in a vat of oil constantly, right? So even your immaculate flipping iron coveralls still had patches of oil all over it and stuff like that, right? So what we do, you remember I said about the Monday morning parade? Monday morning parade, you were issued 5 sets of coveralls. It was supposed to be one a day. You would always have one set of coveralls that never even seen the tank. And that was because those are the parade coveralls that you would get out of after parade. And then you put your fucking knackered old ones on. If you were a gunner, you were still just as greasy and just as oily as the driver, but you had a gunner's crease across the shoulders. If you were a loader, loaders normally spent most of their time in barrack dress. And if you were a commander, then you were in coveralls and they looked like you just come off parade. They were always immaculate, always clean, because the commanders didn't really get their hands dirty. So, because on the tanks was when I properly learnt responsibility. So, for example, I was one of the jobs, like I say, you're the onboard mechanic. So even in camp, you're the person that goes around, does all the maintenance on it and stuff like that. And I was oiling up the wheel hubs, and the guy said, "Oh, it's naffy break. We're going to the naffy. You're coming." I'd only been in the regiment. Probably 2 or 3 months at this point. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I literally just left all my tools where they were, right? Your face just said exactly what. So, now I'm like, really? Like, if I could go back in time, I'd just sit there and just stand in front of myself and go, really? So I went off to the naffy, come back, tools are gone. So I'm like, okay. Now I'm only 18 at this point, so I'm like, okay. No, I'm 17. And so I go and see the commander, right, my commander, and I was like, my tools have gone missing. And he goes, well, you want to find them before Paul Caulfield finds out. Now, Paul Caulfield was the troop sergeant. And he turned around, I was like, well, I've had a look. And he goes, well, you want to properly look. So I'd done a typical 17-year-old look. That's me looking, right? And by the end of the day, hadn't found them. So my commander, who at the time was Steph Forbes, says, have you found your tools? I was like, no. He says, right. He says, you better go and tell Paul Caulfield. So I was like, right, okay. So I walks down, and there's Paul Caulfield at the bottom end of the hangar. And I was like, Sergeant? And he's like, yeah. I says, I've lost my tools. He's like, what? I says, I've lost my tools. He goes, what do you mean you've lost your tools? I says, I lost my tools, right? And he clouted me, right? Right? And he just turned round, reached behind the box like we stood there. Like, do you ever get the feeling that you've been set up? Yeah. Right? And he picked up my tools and just dropped them on the floor in front of us. And he went, if you can't fix the tank's stuck. That means people are going to die because you couldn't be fucked to put your tools away. Didn't lose my tools after that.
No.
Made sure I knew exactly where they were. And the thing is people would say, well, that's out of order that you hit your hell of a learning experience. And I learned the hard way. So,
and you learnt quick.
And I learned very, very quickly.
Which is important.
So, especially in that job. So, yeah, that was something that I totally forgot about until about 10 minutes ago. So, yeah, make sure you know where your kit and equipment is.
And no doubt that then helped you when you went onto your gunner's course with learning the next steps, I suppose, right?
Yeah, well, the gunner's course, on the gunner's course, you don't just learn how to gun, you also learn how to load as well. So it kind of covers you from both jobs. But the loader's jobs were normally reserved for sort of lance corporals and above, because you were also the radio operator, so you had to do your class 1 radio operating.
Okay.
And that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So normally it was the either senior troopers or lance corporals who were the loaders. But yeah, I enjoyed the loading as well. I mean, loading was a hell of a workout, and you ended up with like knuckle rash, where your knuckles would just be cut to ribbons and things like that. And I'd like to think that if you stuck me in a Challenger 1 tank, I could probably still remember how to load it. So, yeah, but it's, the regiment moved across from Challenger to CVRT, so basically small armoured vehicles, reconnaissance vehicles in, I'm going to say 1999, 2000, and that was when we moved to Catterick.
So you moved from Germany to Catterick as a whole unit, family, just everything. How did that work? Because do you take all the kit? Or
No. So basically, the kit and equipment, all the tanks and everything like that, basically, you try to make them as brand new as possible. So we spent the better part of, I think it was about a month, where a team of us went through and spray painted the tanks. So you got air compressors, air guns, issued olive drab and UV flipping paint, issued flipping black UV paint, and you spray painted the tanks, right? Like trying to spray paint proper flipping camo patterns on them, like just guessing. All the tanks had to make sure that when they were inspected by the REME would pull up anything, nuts, bolts missing, washers missing, stuff like that. You had to make sure that they had no jobs on them like that. So when the unit was taking over that camp came in, they would go, right, okay, so if there was a tank that you couldn't get fixed in time, they would go, right, that's the problem. This is on order. This just needs to come in and it'll be on the road and that sort of stuff. But that was quite frowned upon if you had done that. They wanted all of that done and dusted beforehand. So this is something that you started thinking about a year before you moved.
Yeah.
So basically it was the guys, the families, all of that sort of stuff. They had to move out their quarters. The guys moved out the blocks, and then everybody moved across job lot into. We moved into Pirbright barracks in Catterick, which is up the back end. And then we took over the tanks from the unit that were originally there. So basically, you just take over somebody else's kit and equipment. So, and it's the same as anything. Like when you get there, you're like, these tanks are in absolute shit state. They're not as good as the ones we've. Whereas the QRH got in after us, and they probably went, these tanks are in absolute shit state. They're not as good as the ones we've left, and all that sort of stuff. So, because it's never up to your standard, is it?
Exactly.
So, so we were in Catterick for a time. Did I do Battis? I think I'd done another Battis.
And you moved, was that 99 or 2000? I suppose 2000.
No, this was
Then you moved
98. We moved to Catterick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is 98. So it was just after. In fact, prior to the move to Catterick, I'd done another op tour. I'd done another Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Because that was the tour that I'd done with my brother. And we were both at the Maze prison at the same time. And that was at the same time that the IRA blew up the Omagh bomb. So, and I remember being in the block, and the bomb went off, and I think it was about 5.5 miles away from where we were, and it ruffled the curtains in the block. And I remember Richie, who's a friend of mine, sitting bolt upright, and he looked at me and he went, "That was fucking huge." And then obviously all the alarms went off. So after that, it was patrolling the areas and stuff like that, because you wanted to try and capture the guys who'd set the bomb off, and you knew that they were making a bolt for the border. But the thing is it's all time delayed and stuff. They were probably over the border even before the bomb went off. So so that tour was predominantly guarding the Maze prison. So the Maze was if you were IRA and you were convicted of terrorism charges and stuff like that, the Maze prison was where you were sent. Big H blocks and stuff like that, and you had the inner cordon of the inner wall that the prison officers would guard, and then you had a massive wall around that, which is what the army would guard. So our job was to keep people from getting in, and then the prison officers' jobs were to keep them getting out. So, but they still, I mean, I can't remember his name. There was a shooting in there. I mean, one of the guys managed to get his hands on an AK.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
And he basically, each of the buildings had a fence over the top of it, covering the whole thing, just basically like a giant bird cage. And he managed to get through the fence on top of the building, shoot a guy, and then he got off. And by the time the prison officers got into the whole thing, the AK had been given to the priest, and the priest was like sworn that he couldn't say anything because he'd confessed and done all of this sort of stuff. And the guy who they suspected of doing the shooting was in the dining room eating.
Wow.
So yeah, it was so, I wouldn't say corrupt, but it was, they all scratched each other's back in there and stuff like that. So unfortunately, the prison officers in the maze were on a hiding to nothing. So yeah, so obviously the Omar bomb went off, and then that was the catalyst to, because it was like general condemnation. Even members of the IRA were going, "Hang on a minute, we've blown up flipping women and kids now. There's something not quite right here." So then that was the catalyst to the Good Friday Agreement and stuff like that. So
Okay.
and I remember being on patrolling down the street at like 5 to midnight the night the Good Friday Agreement came in. And this guy shouting and screaming at us, throwing bricks at us and all the rest of it. And then we patrolled back down the same street about 20 minutes later, right after midnight. And the guy's coming up shaking our hands. "Oh, there's nothing personal and stuff." And you're like, "Really, mate? Really? Just do me a favour. Stick your bottom lip over your head and swallow hard, mate, because you're just an arsehole."
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that tour was the one and only tour that I done with my brother.
Okay.
But yeah, so that was prior to us moving to Catterick.
Got it.
And then once we got to Catterick, then we were warned off. When we got to Catterick, we were then, because we've been at Catterick about 2 years, we were then warned off that we were going to be moving to the unit to Osnabrück.
Another move.
Right, another
Wow.
unit move. I think it was 2000 that we were due to move to Catterick, to Osnabrück. And by this time, I'd got I had a long-term girlfriend who lived in Sunderland, and obviously being in Catterick and her living in Sunderland. In fact, we'd got a flat. No, this was prior to us getting the flat together. Having a girlfriend literally that close was like perfect for me, and I put in a request to stay in Catterick. So I got posted to 15 Field Workshops, which was a REME battalion, and I was there as the driver operator of the command sultan in forward platoon. So
Okay.
basically, what forward platoon do is in a battle or something like that, if a tank breaks down or is damaged, forward platoon are the guys that drive onto the front line to either fix or recover the vehicle in situ. So they've got warriors and stuff like that and all that sort of stuff. I was the driver and operator of the command vehicle. So what we would do is drive into an area between the rear echelon and the forward troops, make sure we had comms, command them all and things like that. And we were close enough where we could make on-the-spot decisions, that sort of stuff.
Right.
I absolutely loved that job. So if I could have stayed in that job for the rest of my career, I would have done, because I loved working with forward platoon. They were a great bunch of guys. The exercises, the training and all that we'd done was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And during this time, the QDGs were then deployed off to Kosovo. So my brother went off to Kosovo with them. So it was quite funny because I wanted to get, in fact, I was living with my girlfriend at the time in her flat in Sunderland. and this is towards the end of my time with the QDG, and I wanted to. I applied to get. So I didn't have to pay food and accommodation and stuff like that because I wasn't living in there anyway. And they said, no, you're a single soldier. You're not entitled to it. But I did get permission to live out. So when I moved across to 15 Field Workshops, which was on the same camp as what the QDGs were on, because I was already living off camp and they posted me, then they then could stop the food and accommodation. So I ended up making like probably £100 a month extra on a posting that realistically, logistically, just didn't change. So when I was working at 15 Field Workshops, my boss, my OC, was a guy called Ewan McClay, Major McClay. And it's not often you meet officers that if they turn around and said, right, we're going off to certain death, right, you just sit there, stick your mag on, load around into the chamber and just go, right, lead the way, boss, and you'd follow him. He was one of only 2 that I've ever met in my career. And throughout my time at 15 Field, I worked quite closely with him. And he said, look, rather than just staying with the REME as a posting, why don't you transfer across? So I basically decided to put in my transfer across to REME Regimental Specialist. So a Regimental Specialist is a weapons and tactics and a instructor for the REME. Easiest way of explaining it is the REME are very, very good mechanics, fitters, welders, and all that sort of stuff. And if you say to a REME soldier, what do you do for a living? Right? What do you do in the army? They'll go, I'm a fitter or I'm a mechanic. Their first answer should be, I'm a soldier. And they're the people that they spend all their time doing fitting, fixing things, doing all that sort of stuff. But they let the basic soldiering stuff fall through. So I was the person that was brought in as a REME RS to remind them that they're still soldiers. So we're the people that worked in the training wings. We're the people that went to phase 1 depots, recruit training, phase 2 training, pre-deployment training, that sort of stuff. So I had to go and do a course which would happen down in Borden in Wiltshire. And is it Wiltshire or Hampshire? Hampshire, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Borden's Hampshire. Yeah. And I had to go and do this course. The thing is this course was aimed very heavily at infanteers. I was armoured. So they were like, right, let's have a look at your webbing. I was like, webbing? And they're like, where's your webbing? And I was like, I haven't had proper webbing in bloody donkeys since basic. And they're like, well, what do you have? And I'm like, where'd you carry your water? Tank.
Yeah.
Where'd you carry your food? Tank. Like, what happens if your tank gets out? Well, I'm fucked. Right? What happens? How are you going to survive if the tank gets taken out? The chances of me surviving a tank being taken out, right? And the fact is, if I'm managing to get out of my tank after it's been taken out, I'm more worried about the fact that I'm now being chased down by another tank. So I had to learn really, really quickly on that course. I mean, I think my entrance exam, they took me at risk, and I think I only scored like 37%. It was shocking. Like, one of the questions was, what are the 6-section battle drills? Right? And my response was, the 6-section battle drills? Question mark. Right? And things like that. And it was like, oh, my life. And there was only 6 of us on the course. And throughout the whole course, it was basic things like, well, I say basic. So it was give a basic skill at arms lesson. Give a basic first aid lesson. Blah, blah, blah. Things like that. The problem is to a guy who'd spent his entire time in armoured vehicles and doing armoured stuff, I was on a course against 4 of the 6 guys on that course had worked at training depots. So they were qualified skill at arms instructors, qualified first aid instructors. So they're going dead easy, and I'm going, well, hang on a minute, I'm not even qualified in what you're asking me to teach. So at the end of it, I finished the course 5th out of 6, right? And I remember the officer saying, well, it's not a particularly good 5th out of 6, not particularly good. And I was like, hang on a minute. He is an infantry. That's his bread and butter. He's also at a training regiment. He's just qualified skillet arms instructor, blah, 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 blah. I said, so given the fact of the people that you've put me up against, I said, if I put them in a Challenger tank and said, no training at all, fire away, right? I was like, oh yeah, well, by the way, we're assessing you, right? I was like, so I've done, actually, in my opinion, I've done quite well. To which he went, actually, I haven't thought of that. I was like, well, thank you very much. So the fact that I passed was a big thing to me.
Yeah.
So after that, I went back up to Catterick for a time, only for a couple of months while I waited for my posting to come through. But this time, I was now wearing my REME cap badge, not my QDG.
Got it.
So every time the flipping lads from the QDG see me in my REME cap badge, right, I just got a load of abuse, right? Stuff like turncoat and flipping retread and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The usual sort of banter. And I was then posted to the Army Technical Foundation College in Arborfield.
Okay.
So the ATFC, so you've heard of the Army Foundation College in Harrogate.
Yes.
So the ATFC, the Army Technical Foundation College, took the technical trades. So signals, REME, RLC, RLC, Ammotechs, Royal Engineers and things like that. And it was a college, so it was 28 weeks. For them, it was 28 weeks of basic training. But in that 28 weeks of basic training, they also done their A-levels as well.
Wow. Okay.
So the first 12 weeks was basic. So having me shouting and bawling at them at like 6 o'clock in the morning, room inspections, all of that sort of stuff. Then in the second 12 weeks was more academic for them. So they had to go into lessons and they had proper tutors and things like that, exams, all that sort of stuff. But split it into it throughout their daily administration was still done by us. But then also exercises and things like that. So the longest exercise they done was an exercise called Dragon's Teeth. And they were always named after teeth. So it'd be like Milk Teeth was your one-nighter, which is your first night out, right? And it wasn't, you didn't even take weapons. It was, this is how you build a basher, because some of them had never slept under a basher before.
Right.
And then the other ones were, what was it? Milk Teeth. I can't remember what the other ones were, but then Dragon's Teeth was the final one, and that was a 2-week platoon exercise in Brecon. And one of the funniest things, it wasn't funny at the time, I really lost my shit, but one of the funniest things that I remember is we were doing a night move. So we're going from one location to another location, middle of the night, it's like pitch black. I don't think there was much in the way of moonlight either. And if you've never been in true darkness outside where there's no moonlight or anything like that, you don't realize just how dark things can get. So I'm patrolling along and I'm keep on thinking, look, I need to make sure I don't lose any of my recruits, because if I lose a recruit, I am screwed. Right, that's my career over. So every sort of 100, 150 meters, I'm stopping, telling them to go to ground, going along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, I've got my recruits. Follow on, right, patrolling along. And we'd been moving for about 2 hours, going from location to like woodblock to woodblock to woodblock, just so I had physical references of where I've gone and stuff like that. And we get into what's called a hasty harbour. So a hasty harbour is just lines in a woodblock, right? You don't have your basher. If it's raining, tough, right? And it's just you put your sentries out to guard the thing, and then you try and make yourself as comfortable as humanly possible in the woodblock with really nothing much around you. Well, I knew this was going on, so I had my Gore-Tex flipping bivy liner in my day sack. So I just got into that. And I'm just trying to fall asleep. And this lad called Recruit Gale and he's from Dewsbury Corporal. And Gale comes up and he goes, Corporal, I got a problem. And I was like, oh, fuck, You know, when you're absolutely knackered. I was like, right, well, take a knee, Gail. Come on. I was like, right, what's the problem? And he went, I can't find my rifle. And I was like, no. I was like, well, do me a favour. Fuck off and find it. I was like, because losing your rifle, like, it's a big, big problem in the army. Like, one of my friends, his saying is, as long as I haven't lost a rifle, nothing's a drama. Right? And this recruit coming up going, I've lost my rifle. So I was like, well, fuck off and get it then. He's like, no, you don't understand, Corporal. I was like, what? He says, I lost it about an hour and a half ago. And I went, what? I said, why the fuck didn't you tell me earlier? And he went, I was trying to get the bottle up to tell you. I was like, oh my God. And basically what he'd done was, as we'd done a stop, he'd put his rifle on the floor to tie his bootlace, looked up and realised that everybody had moved on, panicked and ran after us, right? And then as he's plodding along, he's gone, I left my rifle on the floor. So he then he then was like, right, what do I do? What do I do? But because it's dead of night and how far sound travels, he didn't want to tell me, right, that he'd lost his rifle. So he literally just sat on that information for like an hour and a half. So I was like, for fuck's sake. So I get out my flipping Gore-Tex bivvy bag. And I went and seen Jono, who's the troop sergeant, and went, look, mate, Gail's lost his rifle. And he went, what? And I went, Gail's lost his rifle. He went, how the fuck's he done that? And I was like, don't know. I said, I'm going to have to take the Land Rover. And he's like, well, why do you need to take the Land Rover? And I went, because I'm going to need the lights to find the rifle. So I was like, fair enough. So basically what we ended up having to do was take the Land Rover and drive the route, looking at night for a black and green rifle that's in grass, right? And it was like, I didn't find it I think it took us about 5 hours to find it. And that was one of the like crazy, like just the whole logic behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did want to tell you, but I was petrified how you react. And I was like, do you not understand? The longer you left it, the more pissed off I was going to get.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, well done for finding it.
It took
But
hours.
I just want to take this moment to pause, because what happened then was you with your tools back when you were
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
not as not to the scale.
Yeah. But yeah, look, I mean,
But what year was that? So is that the early 2000s?
so that was, yeah. So I started at Arborfield in 2001.
2001. Okay, so you'd done the transfer over to the REME.
Yeah.
And so what rank were you? You just mentioned that you were corporal. So had you brought over a rank from QDG?
So when I was attached to 19 CSS, when I was attached to 15 Field, I'd got promoted to Lance Corporal.
Right, okay.
So, and the ranks just all blur in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been promoted to Lance Corporal. And the whole time that I was with 15 Field, I was a Lance Corporal because of how much kit and equipment and the responsibility of my job.
Got it.
So once I got promoted, once I passed that course and moved across to Arborfield, you can only be a recruit instructor if you're a corporal. So I then got promoted. So technically, me transferring across to the REME got me a promotion.
Nice, yeah.
So I got promoted pretty quickly, and then started as a corporal at the ATFC.
Got it.
And the ATFC, I really, really enjoyed working there as a recruit instructor.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being on the phone to my dad the day before my first intake, and I said to my dad, I was like, look, I says, I know that right now there's a load of kids all petrified on their way to basic training, not knowing what's going on. I was like, I'm worried that I'm not going to do the job any justice. And I'm like, I've got to take civilians, break them down and build them up and turn them into soldiers. And I was like, I don't know if I've got the ability to do that. My dad was like, well, the only way you're going to know is when you try.
Yeah.
So it's like, right, okay. So I the first platoon, I actually have a picture of my first section downstairs. It's the only picture of me at ATFC Arborfield that I've got out. So, and that was not only sort of like them passing out of training and becoming a soldier, it's me proving that I could actually do that. And also, I'd never done any proper instruction prior to that. I mean, my first skill at arms lesson, because I'd done my skill at arms course by this time,
Right.
in Brecon, and my first skill at arms lesson was supposed to be 1 40-minute period, and I was being assessed, right? Which, to be honest, assessing a guy on his very first skill at arms lesson, the first time he's ever taught recruits, fresh after is a bit of a dick move, right? So, and I was absolutely petrified, because it was a big thing that if you got a flag for not being a competent instructor, that was a big thing to try and get away from. So I was like, right, okay, I'm going to make sure that they know every single detail of this, blah, 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 blah. The problem is I went over elaborate, and all that happened was it ended up that 40-minute lesson turned into an hour, which meant that they'd missed out on the next lesson, which caused a knock on, and it just cut. So I then got flagged for that, because I wasn't keeping to time, and I was like, oh, my life. But once you realize that these are human beings, they'll eventually pick it up, and there is some stuff that you have to go back and go over in the evenings and stuff like that, because each lesson is aimed to teach 8 people at a time. So they say, right, this is a 40-minute period. Well, that's a 40-minute period if you've got 8 people. But going through training, some of my platoons, I had like 12, 13 people in my section. So you're like, well, you're telling me, give me 40 minutes. You're giving me brand new people who've never touched a weapon before, and you've given me more than I'm supposed to have by almost like 30%. So it was a bit of a struggle, but you learn as you grow as an instructor, and as you grow as a sort of a mentor to people, you learn what people are like, and you learn the people that you can go, right, I'll show you once, you'll pick it up straight away. Unfortunately for you, me and you are going to have to carry this on back in the block, because we're going to have to go through this quite a bit.
But that's good. I think that's part of your skill as an instructor, picking up on what people can learn, right?
But you have to learn how to do that initially anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not something you can just pick up straight away. So yeah, working at Arborfield, I really, really enjoyed.
That's cool.
So I was expected to be fitter than all the recruits, faster than all the recruits. I mean, I was 20 in mid-20s, dealing with like these are 16 and 17-year-olds, and I'm expected to be able to run a mile and a half quicker than them. I was like, really? But this is about the time that I started noticing severe back pain and things like that. So I was constantly, like, what I would do was I'd do phys with all the recruits and stuff, because I was seeing that I had to do the phys. And then I'd say to, like, Baz Rowan, who was one of the other instructors, I'd say, Baz, can you take my section back to the lines? And he'd go, yeah, no problem. So he'd take my section back, and I'd be in clip state for the rest of the day.
Had you done an injury to yourself, or
no,
it's just built up?
So basically, every time I went to the medical centre and said, look, I've got severe back pain, blah, 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 I was told, oh, you've just pulled a muscle.
Okay.
And this continued on for probably the better part of 18 months. And I was like, look, you've been telling me I pulled a muscle for 18 months now, and it's not. There's something wrong. Luckily, the doctor that I normally seen wasn't in. And another doctor was in, and he was a rheumatologist. That was his sort of specialty. And he said, have you had any blood tests? I was like, why would I have blood tests? And he went, right. He said, well, take some blood, and we'll see what we get. So took some blood, and it turns out I've got a rare autoimmune disease. So I suffer from Ankylosing Spondylitis. Try saying that when you're drunk. So an AS for short.
Okay.
AS is basically your immune system attacks your own body. So there's a protein that's produced by your body, and your immune system sees this protein. It's completely like the protein doesn't do anything. You could have it, and your immune system's like, whatever, right? But my immune system sees it and goes, that's a problem, and attacks it. So what happens is it's predominantly around the spine, the SIJ, sacroiliac joints in the hips, and it causes inflammation. Well, what happens is it inflames, and then it reduces, and then the immune system attacks, it inflames and reduces, and that keeps that to and fro and keeps going. Your body goes, I can't keep doing this. I need to find a way to stop this happening. So your body solidifies what's being attacked. So it's normally vertebrae, ligaments, stuff like that. So it solidifies. Basically, you can, worst case scenario, you can end up with a condition called bamboo spine. So your spine is completely solid. So have you ever seen the people walking down the street where they're bent over like that? That's AS.
Okay.
Right. Back in the sort of old days, if you were, because they didn't know what it was, they were told, back injury, bed rest. Absolute worst thing you could do for AS. You need to keep moving so those joints don't solidify and keep active. So I got the news that I was diagnosed with AS, and I said, right, okay, what's the next step? And they went, well, painkillers, really. So NICADs, anti-inflammatories. And I was like, right, okay. So NICAD is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. And so I was put on NICADs and stuff like that. Finished at Arborfield, moved across to ATR Pirbright.
Okay, to another training regiment.
So to another training regiment,
Right.
which was quite funny because they say that doing phase 1 burns you out more than an operational tour because you're doing it for 4 times as long. It's full on. So when you've got the recruits coming up going, I'm tired, Corporal, you sat there thinking, I put you to bed at 10 o'clock last night because I had to be there to make sure your lights were out. You got up at 6 o'clock this morning. You've had 8 full hours. After I finished with you, I had to go back to the block. I then had to wash all my kit to make sure that I'm immaculate. Wash and iron all my kit to make sure I'm more immaculate than you in the morning. I then had to prep my lessons for tomorrow. So regularly I would fall asleep in the pamphlet. I'd have a line across there where the Pam had fallen against my face. And then they're stood in front of me. Like, I've had 3 hours sleep max, and they're going, I'm tired, Corporal, because I've had 8 hours. And you're like, get out of my way. So when I went to Pirbright, I was pretty, like, I put my all into Arborfield and then got posted to Pirbright and expected to start all over again without a break. And my OC even turned around and said, you're not as keen and thrusting as the other guys. I was like, I'm fucking knackered. I'm burnt out. I've done this for 1.5 years already. And he was like, oh, okay. But then I had to sort of keep up and keep going with it. So
because it's never phase 1, isn't it?
It's another phase 1 regiment, but this is now adult entry. So you're dealing with 18-year plus. And when I was there, I had a recruit who got back squadded. So what back squadded is, if you do not reach a required standard, then you are given remedial training. If that remedial training is failing for whatever reason, then the recruit can be back squadded, which means that he will be put back to a certain part of training to repeat that phase of training. And I had a recruit called Dijon, like the mustard, right? And I will remember Dijon till the day I die. And the reason why is because he is probably the most clued up person I've ever met, right? And I'll explain why. He got back squadded to me. And when he got to me, right, he was back squadded to week 1, day 1. Right? Now, that never happens, right, unless you've epically screwed up. So he got back squadded to me, and I'm sat there reading his reports, because obviously each week you've got to write a report on the recruits. And I'm reading the reports, and he was an intelligent bloke. He was a teacher from Ghana. Good background, quite academic, all the rest of it. And then I think it was week 8 or week 9, refused to soldier. Just stopped.
Oh.
Right? So they were like, right, well, back squadron you to week 6, which is when you finish doing drill training, which is like the sort of halfway mark of training. Week 8 or 9, can't remember which, refused to soldier. Right? But prior to that, like model soldier.
Right.
And it's like, what the hell's going on? So they were like, right, okay, we're going to try and teach him a lesson. Back squad him to week 1, day 1. So, comes to me. I give him the usual speech that I normally give all my new recruits. So I'm like, look, I don't care what's happened in the other platoons. I don't care, right? As long as you work hard, put 100% into everything, I'll be fine with you. So for the first 6 weeks, gleaming soldier, right? Model soldier, helping with all, because he's done it so many times before, helping the other recruits, all the rest of it. Gets to week 8 or 9. I'd just been off to see my specialist for my AS. And at this point, I need to point out, I was on steroids. So I was on a steroid called prednisolone. And that's where I'd gone from being like a 32-inch waist and being able to run 1.5 miles in flipping like uber quick to basically looking like I'd eaten myself. Right? I look like Jabba the Hutt's stunt double, right? Like I put on some weight. Anyway.
Great description there, by the way.
Thanks. Also, right, the thing with the prednisolone is it caused, one of the side effects is it caused aggression and angry outbursts. So that's my defense anyway.
Okay.
And I'm sticking to it.
Let's hear the story.
So I get back out to the platoon lines, right? And it must be week 9 because they're starting to build the drill training up for the pass off. Anyway, I go as you go to the top of the stairs, you turn right to go to the platoon sergeant and platoon commander's office. You turn left to go to the training instructor's office. And just as I'm turning left, I hear shouting, right? To which I'm like, ooh, somebody's getting round in. So I literally go up to the, sort of peel my nose around the door for the platoon sergeants, right? Looking through the glass. And there's Dijon stood in front of the platoon sergeant. So I'm like, well, he's my recruit. I'm going to find out what the hell's going on. So I knocked, opened the door. And I can't remember the name of the sergeant. But he sat there and he's going, sign the fucking paper. And he's going, no. He's going, sign the paper. It's like, no. And he's like, look, right? And I'm like, what the hell's going on? He's like, got onto the parade square. He says, starts to do drill, stops. Just stops in the middle of the parade square. Refuses to soldier. Refuses to march. Refuses to do everything. He's like, so? He says, I'd done what any normal platoon sergeant would do in this situation. I sent him to the guard room. Because the guard room's where you go to get disciplined and all that sort of stuff. Got to the guard room. Refuses to do anything for the guard room. To the point of view, the provo were like, well, short of physically manhandling him, we can't do anything. So he gets sodded off back up to the lines. So they go through the process of AGIing him, which is administrative action. So, and he's trying to get Dijon to sign it. And Dijon is refusing to sign it. And he's like, sign it. He's like, no. And he says, why are you not signing it? Because I don't agree with it. He's like, no, you're not signing to say you agree with it. You're signing to say you've read it. And he's like, no. He says, look, you can even write, I do not agree with this underneath it. He said, as long as you sign it, no. Right? So he was being so... I mean, one of the things that you massively... And you'll remember this. One of the major things you get hammered into your in basic training is respect. Right? And for how disrespect... Like the platoon commander sat behind him. For how disrespectful he was being... I just flashed, right? And seen red. And I don't remember much about it, apart from hearing the platoon commander shouting, get him off him, get him off him. Right? And I think... by what the platoon sergeant said, I was trying to throw him out the window, right? We were on the top floor, right? Anyway, I went off. Platoon commander flipping sits me down and he's like, what's going on? And that's when I was like, I'm really sorry. I don't know what the hell happened there. I just don't know what's going on. So anyway, the whole escapade with Dijon and the platoon sergeant sort of starts to settle down, The platoon sergeant is currently working with the sergeant major to work out what exactly they're going to do. So they get Dijon in, and he's sat in front of the sergeant major, right? And I'm stood there, and the sergeant major's like, right, Dijon, you need to sign that. And he goes, no. He's like, you need to sign this. He's like, no. And he's like, right, okay. He says, you do realise in refusing to sign this, you're refusing a direct order, so therefore this is not going to go from a AGI, this is going to go to a major AGI, which is a lot worse. And he's like, I don't care. So he's like, right, Geordie, take him back to the block. So he goes back to the block, right, and he says to me, right, I want to terminate my service. Now, when you're in basic training, you have, as an adult, you have 3 months? No, you have a month to terminate your service. So, is it a month or 2 months? No, it's 2 months. And the reason why is you give it a month to see whether you definitely don't like it, and then you have a month after that, so 4 weeks to terminate your service. If you're a junior, right, it's up until your 18th birthday. So I've known juniors literally get to the unit and they're like, nah, don't want to do this. So Dijon, who was an adult, been back squatted God knows how many times, was well outside of his bracket.
Yeah.
So he turned around and said, I want to terminate my service. And I was like, you can't. I said, you're in for 4 years, mate, whether you like it or not. No, I want to terminate my service. Right? And I was like, you can't do it. He's like, I'm going to write a letter. I was like, write a letter all you want. I was like, for crying out loud. So I'm sat there and I'm in my office and I look out the window and I see Dijon walking across to HQ. And I'm like, so I was like, oh, strange. So I bimbled into the platoon sergeant's office and I went, what'd you send Dijon across to HQ for? And he turned around and he went, I didn't. And I was like, he's written a letter and he's going to hand deliver it. So I was like, Jesus. So I sprint out of the flipping office, run up to him, right? And I was like, what are you doing? He said, I'm handing in my notice of resignation. I said, to who to? And he was like, the officer commanding. And I was like, right. So literally I went, right. I said, well, you can't just walk into the OC's office. I said, you need to speak to the sergeant major. So we get up there and the OC's like, the sergeant major's like, oh my God. Right. Dusty Miller, the sergeant major. He went on to be a yeoman warder, I think. Absolute gleaming bloke. And in walks Dijon, right? And he's like, right, sit down, Dijon. Right? And he gets this letter and he went, right. He said, I can tell you right now that you are outside of your discharge as of right, DAOR bracket. He said, I want you, he says, you're going to have to, he says, either we kick you out, he said, because of you're not reaching the grade, he says, or he says, you're going to be in for 4 years, whether you like it or not. Right? And he turned around and he went, no one of any authorities told me that. And the sergeant major looked at me, right? But anyway, he's a warrant officer class 2. And he's like, and he went, no, me telling you is the authority. And he's like, no, I don't recognise you as an authority. And he went, you fucking what? He says, who do you see as an authority? He says, I see only of a person of the of level standing as myself as an authority. And he went, who's that? And he says, the officer commanding fucking of Rowcroft Company. And he went, so you think, as a recruit, you're on the same par as the OC,
Oh
right?
my God.
So while this is all going on, obviously the door's open, the OC can hear what the hell's going on. So the OC literally stood up, walked in, and he went, recruit Dijon. He goes, yes, sir. And he went, denied, and walked out, right?
Really?
I was like that. Yes, brilliant. So Dijon then got sodded off back, right? And they then went through the whole thing, and they were like, look, obviously there's something going on, but we don't know what it is, right? So what they done was they then decided they were going to back squad him again to week 1, right, to properly teach him a lesson. So it's a case of not only do you have to now do the next 4 years, you've got to do it from the very beginning. So he went through all of that again. Now at week 6, right, you have your drill test. What's your award for passing drill test?
Your berry.
No, there's another one.
Oh, before that.
No, you get a long weekend.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So you do your drill test on the Thursday, you get the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. Right? So he done his drill test, and I come into work, because as instructors we're still there. I come into work on the Monday and there's a letter waiting. Right? And I open this letter up, and it's, I, flipping Mr. Dijon, blah, 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 do not accept the army as a legitimate employer. I do not see them as my, basically this whole thing. And it was like, if you want to contact me, you have to go through the Ghanaian embassy. I'm claiming diplomatic immunity, all the rest of it. These are the keys. It was his ID card in there. It was the keys to his locker, right? All the rest of it. And we were like, what is going on? Like, why is this guy like going completely mental? So we obviously got in touch with the RMPs. The RMPs turned up, right? He was educated. He put his address at the top of the letter.
Oh, right.
Dickhead. Right? So he went off, right? The RMPs turned up, and the report we got back from the RMPs is whoever it is has fully briefed him up, because he knows we're not allowed to enter his house without a warrant. He said, but, he says, the house, where was the house? The house was up north somewhere. It was Bolton or Burnley or somewhere. And he turned around, he said, the house, he said, is like a 3-bedroom house, terraced house. He said, there's loads of people in there, like loads, just heaving. I was like, right, okay. So we sat there, like me and the sergeant major are like, right, okay, because we were then told by the OC and the ADG to look into it and find out what the hell was going on. So we're going, what the hell is, like, what is really going on with this guy? And we got a phone call from one of the clerks in HQ. And she said, can you come over? I was like, right. She said, what week? It was week 9. He kept on fucking up. She says, what week does he keep on screwing up? And we're like, week 9. And she's like, right. She says, well, I think I may have found a reason. It's like, right. She said, week 8 is when we get the list of who they want to visit for pass-off. And if they're foreign, week 8 is when we apply for the visitors' visas. I was like, right. I said, if they don't pass off, are those visitors' visas revoked? She went, no.
Oh.
She says, what I've noticed, she said, is he's obviously put his name in, put in the request like 4 or 5 times. She said he's never put the same name down twice. He was using it as a way of importing his family on visitors' visas, and then they would escape off into the ether.
Wow.
I was like, no way.
Can see why that
Right?
stays out in your mind.
And I was like, that is absolutely mental. And Dusty was like, he went, that's just crazy. He went, so this guy's going through all the crap of basic training repeatedly, and we think, that's teaching him. And each time he's going, that's another 4 family members.
Is it 4 each time?
Yeah.
What?
We were like, wow.
Oh my God.
So yeah, he was importing his family using the British Army training system. So, and we were like, how did he even, like, I couldn't even come up with that. It's like, so we think that he's got a friend who works or must have worked at a training establishment in the admin side of it to come up with that.
That's
because
insane.
we were like, that is absolutely mental. So,
Jeez. Whoa, man. I bet that blew your mind when it all came
just sat there like that.
How did that happen? Jeez. Wow. Okay. So we've covered an awful lot there. And I suppose we're coming near the end of your career at this point, aren't we? You're coming to the end of a second time at phase 1, which no doubt burnt you out. You've just found out about...
So, yeah. At the end of that, I then got posted to a phase 2 establishment. So phase 2 is a lot more laid back than phase 1. You take it that the soldiers are now trained and they're actually free to go off and sort of develop themselves. Phase 2, as a phase 2 instructor, I didn't actually do any of the physical instruction with the recruits because it was all technical. It was all mechanics and all that sort of stuff, and it was all civilian contractors.
For REME?
So for the REME.
Got it.
So what my job was predominantly keeping them up to speed with weapons, keeping them up to speed with exercises and things like that. And then also I was there as the basically gopher, the admin guy in the office. So another corporal and a sergeant. So we just sort of kept them in the loop that they were still recruits and still soldiers and stuff like that, whilst they were still going through their training.
Fair.
And that training was 28 weeks, I think, that they came to us. So we had them for a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
Whilst I was there at Semi Borden, I was given. They had a rock climbing club, and obviously I was big into my climbing at the time. And they said, "Oh yeah, we'd like you to take over the climbing club." I was like, oh, "Okay, climbing club. Is that like you're the climbing club because we've said you're the climbing club, and what's the climbing club got? Oh, it's just you." So it wasn't like that at all. They went, "Oh, there's the key to the storeroom. What we want you to do is go in, check it, and when you're happy, come and sign it off." So I went into the storeroom, and I'm expecting like 2 old pairs of climbing shoes and a bouldering mat from the 1970s. And I went in, and it was like an Aladdin's cave of equipment.
Wow.
Right? It was absolutely stacked to the gills, and I was like, "Wow." Only one problem: kit and equipment like that needs a logbook to log how many climbs, how many falls, if anything's been like untoward happened to it, like it was dropped in a river or anything. None of it had logbooks, none of it at all. And I was like, "Well, I'm not allowed to use any of this." I said, "If I use this with any of the recruits and they fall, I'm liable." So the guy was like, the guy in charge of the PRI went, "Well, just basically go through it. If you bin it, write it down, and we'll PRI it and get replacements." So because none of it had logbooks, it all had to be binned.
Oh no.
I say binned. My car may or may not have been parked next to the bin with the boot open. So my personal rock climbing stash went through the roof.
May or may not have.
May have. Well, the thing is, the problem is I was in a situation where, because I used to use that equipment for my own personal climbing, I could check it over and make sure there wasn't anything untoward or anything like that visibly, and then I climb on it at risk. But for the actual REME climbing club, there is no way on this planet they would allow recruits to climb on it.
That's too unsafe.
So exactly. Yeah. So I started or continued the climbing club, drummed up a bit of support, and by the end of it, I think there was 8 people in the climbing club. We were climbing pretty much every night and climbing every sports afternoon.
Okay.
I had 3 of those. Bearing in mind these are phase 2, so it's their first experience of like army level of sport. I had 3 that got into the army climbing team. I had 1 that was army and into service climber, and she was very, very good.
Nice. Yeah.
So to the stage of her first ever inter service championship. So that's Army versus Navy versus Air Force. She came second in the women's.
Wow, that's good.
And she was claiming stuff like. And the thing is the finals of that was all down to what hold you got to, and you got a minus. You got what the holds were all numbered, and you got a minus if you reached for it and missed it. You got that number if you touched it, and then you got a plus if you touched it, held on to it, but then came off, right? And then the next one would be the next numbers and stuff like that. And she was there, and she knew that she wasn't going to be able to get to. So she'd done a leap and touched the next one up, the next two up. So she went and just leaped, grabbed it, fell thingy. Everyone's like, "She touched that? No way!" And that got her second place. Wow. So the climber club done really, really well.
Yeah, I was going to say. So are you climbing as well at this time?
I was climbing as well. So I was using that as my main fitness.
Okay.
So I like I say, I And the thing is, because I had now this amount of climbing equipment as well, I was also doing quite a bit of outdoor as well.
Cool. Okay.
So
And so what year did you get there? Borden?
to Borden, 2006.
2006. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you're taking on this, and how's your
AS.
AS going?
So I was on the NICADs. So I'd come off the actual steroids, and I was on the NICADs. So I was on one called Archery, and it was manageable.
Okay.
So at around this time, this is when sort of the advancements in the drugs for it started to improve. So they came up with a drug initially called a beta blocker, and basically it was an immunity suppressor. But the problem is it was by injection only. The injections have to be held in a fridge and all that sort of stuff. So if I could have stayed on those injections, which would have pretty much killed the AS in its tracks. The problem is as soon as I took one of those injections, I would have been P7 non-deployable.
Right.
If I didn't take them and dealt with the pain and had painkillers, then I was P3 deployable. So I was like, well, I'm a soldier. I want to stay deployable. So I was going regularly to Headley Court, so the rehabilitation hospital there, and going there every 3 to 6 months, and having sort of 2 weeks at a time there, where I go through the course there, just to make sure I was managing it and things like that.
And is this the end of 2000s when you're doing the?
So this is mid 2000s. This is mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And then in 2008, I was then posted from Borden to 19 CSS in Belfast.
Okay.
So, which was a bit of a... So I remember getting that posting order and saying, right, okay, who do I need to speak to about a brief? I need to know about that. And they went, no, you just get the ferry, mate. I'm like, no. Like, 10 years ago, I was there with rifle, helmet, body armor, riots, fighting, terrorists. And they're like, no, you just go over, mate. Get the ferry. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. And they're like, no, that's what it is.
You can understand the
difference. Just couldn't get my head around it. So my first experience of going back to Belfast after all the op banners was when I was posted to Kinniger. And I remember riding off the ferry on my motorbike, because I didn't have a car at the time, on my motorbike with a rucksack on my back, riding through the areas that I had to have a weapon to go through 10 years before. And I'm like, what the hell? And then when you get off in Belfast, you've got the Heartland and Wolf cranes, which is quite famous, the big yellow cranes and things like that. I think it might be blue now. And I was just like, this is mental. So
was you feeling like anxious?
I was I was apprehensive as hell.
Yeah. Something doesn't feel right. Is someone going to jump out? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So it took a while to sort of get settled, but once you're out there, you suddenly realise that, like, the British government was saying, oh yeah, it's all fine. Northern Ireland, there's nothing going on there anymore, right? No, there was plenty going on, but you never heard about it on the mainland, because if they talked about it on the mainland, then the government would have to admit that the Good Friday Agreement hadn't quite worked, right? There was still stuff going on. There was still shootings. There was still the occasional flipping attack and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't anything close to what it was in the 90s. So I got posted to 19 CSS in Belfast, and my first week there, I remember one of the guys coming in, and I was posted to training wing, and it was myself, Ali Allardyce, so we were the two full screws. Jolie Ross was another full screw. Then you had Joe Rushbrook, who was a sergeant, and then Percy Thrower, who was the warrant officer training for the training warrant officer. And there was another sergeant called Greenie, who was REME. And Greenie says, do you want to trip back to the mainland? And I was like, why, what we're doing? He says, well, I've got all the weapons because we were warned off for ops for doing Afghan. And he says, I've got to drop a load of weapons off in back on the mainland. He says, if you want, he says, you can jump in and navigate and do a bit of the driving. I was like, yeah, that's no problems at all. And at the time, I had a fiance, and she was down in Tidworth. So I said, well, how's about this? I said, we do all of that. I said, you drop me off with my fiance. I said, and then I'll meet you back at the ferry port in Birkenhead at the end of the weekend. And he was like, yeah, that works out fine. He says, because then I can go home and see it. He can go and see his missus. I can go and see my missus. And then we just meet up at the ferry port and go back to... So we get up early doors. I think it was a Thursday. It was a Thursday. Early doors on the Thursday. We load up the truck, the van, filled with all these... And there's like 8 GPMGs, there's a heavy machine gun, there's a grenade machine gun, there's like 30 SIG pistols. There's like this transit van is stacked full of weapons, right? And we're driving through Belfast with it, right? And we get
I'm guessing they're in weapon bundles.
So they're in...
They're not loose.
You know the pelly cases?
Oh, pelly cases.
So they're all in the pelly cases.
Just to give people a better idea rather than rolling around
just rolling
the back.
around. So we go down to the ferry port, and the ferry port from Kinniger is literally like a 20-minute drive. So if you could drive as the crow flies, it would literally be a 5-minute drive, but there's a big stretch of water in it. So we get to the ferry port and we get checked in and stuff like that, and drive onto the ferry, and we're all sat up in the thing, and the ferry crosses over. Now the ferry from Birkenhead to Belfast, and then from Belfast to Birkenhead is 8 hours. It's not a short ferry. We're about an hour into the journey, and Greenie just looks at me and turns white. And I'm like, what's the matter? And he went, I've left all the authorization paperwork on the desk in the office. And I went, we're on a ferry going from Belfast to England that's filled with weapons. We currently, when we get to the other side, have to drive through a police checkpoint with all these weapons, and you're telling me that all the paperwork that says we're authorised to do it is on the desk in Belfast, right? And it was like, well, how the hell are we going to do this? Because middle of the Irish Sea, you've got no signal. You're going to get, when the ferry docks, we've got no way of getting that paperwork to us. So I was like, fuck's sake. So he's like, I'm going to get bussed for this. Right? And I was like, that's fine, mate. My name's not on any of the documentation. I was like, I might leave this as a flipping pedestrian. Right? And anyway, the ferry docks, right? And I get in the driver's seat and I was like, right, whatever the fuck you do, just don't panic. I said, we're not doing anything illegal. We're doing what we're supposed to do. It's just you've made a mistake. So we're driving round, right? And the two of us, like, you know, the old look innocent, right? We must have looked like that because as soon as we came around the corner, the police checkpoint went, right? So we pulled over. And all this time, Greenie was from Yorkshire, and he's going, oh, no, lad, no, please, no. Right? And she went, yeah, pull over. And it's like, oh, fuck. So the copper turns up. I wound down the window, right? Me and him both flashed our army ID cards.
You're not in uniform.
Right? We're not in uniform. And both flashed our army ID cards. And we said, look, just to let you know, before you start pulling the vehicle apart, I said, we're carrying a lot of weapons. And she went, what? I said, yeah, we're on pre-deployment training for Northern Ireland. We're returning all the weapons to some of the flipping garrisons on the mainland. And she went, right, okay, well, let's have a look. So she goes around the back, opens the back up, right, and just sees it stacked to the gills with flipping, pelly cases.
Cases, yeah.
Right? And she just closed it and she went, oh, I'm not fucking looking through that lot. She went, have you got your paperwork? And so I reached into the pocket of the fucking door, and you remember the work ticket?
Yeah.
Right? Which is just like the work ticket, FMT fucking 3 and stuff like that. So it's just random, just shit paperwork. And I went, yeah. Right? And she went, that's all right then. Off you go.
Oh, no.
and waved us through.
How did you do that?
I was like, fucking hell. And Greeny's going, oh my God, my heart's going at 100, right? So we literally got it back. What we had to do, so it could be all checked back in, is we had to get them to fax the paperwork to the units that were receiving, so we could go, right, okay, this is exactly what we're handing back to you. So, yeah, Greeny, that one moment, Greeny going,
Jeez, man.
shit. So, anyway, yeah, I spent the weekend with my fiance at the time, and then went back to Northern Ireland. About a week later, there's a parade, and the brigade commander comes up in front of everybody, and he goes, okay, just to let you know, I've relieved your commanding officer of his command. And I was like, what? And he went, some of this is down to you. And I was like, what sort of a unit have I come to where they've sacked the CO? And basically, a long and short of it was the CO and the brigade commander didn't get on at all. Right, they butted heads. They were like two rotten sheep. But the problem was one of the guys who worked in the armory we still to this day don't know what had happened, but the keys were in the safe in the guard room. He hadn't locked the armory. So the front door open, cages open. You could have just walked in, helped yourself to a rifle, right? It was found at 2:15 in the morning by the patrol going past with a dog. So obviously he reported it. It went all like through the roof and all that sort of stuff. So the QM resigned and the CO got sacked. Right? Obviously we were just about to get sorted for deployment to Afghanistan. So they took the commandant of Sandhurst at the time, and he got attached as our CO. Right, Lieutenant Colonel Phillips, right? He's the second officer that I said that I would follow to certain death.
Right.
Absolute gleaming bloke, right? Very, very clever, very switched on, tactically aware of everything, constantly asked the what if questions, and all that sort of stuff. So he turned up, and I liked him instantly because he had because he had to get a hold of a unit which were a bit of a laughing stock at the time because it was a trial. So a CSS battalion had never been trialed before, a combat service support battalion, and that is half REME, half RLC. And it's, if you're deploying anywhere around the world, you pick up that CSS battalion, they take you, you've got all of your combat service support in one place.
Yeah.
Right? But it was a bit of a laughing stock or a bit of a joke when they come up with the idea. They try to put it in, and then what happens is then the CO gets sacked, which makes it even more of a laughing stock. And now we're deploying, and this CO's brought in to whip it into shape. So Colonel Phillips came in, and he came in, and he was very sort of hard-edged, no bullshit. I really liked him. I got on really well with him. So we went off and went. In fact, I was due to go to Afghanistan on the Thursday. Sorry, back up a bit. So my fiance at the time said to me she wanted, the plan was I was going to go to Afghan, come back from Afghan, and we were going to get married. And she said, look, I don't want to get married going to Afghan. After Afghan. She says, I want to get married prior to you going to Afghan. So our marriage was like planned, organised and executed in like 3 weeks. So I got married on the Saturday. I flew out to Afghanistan on the following Thursday. I was supposed to be out a week after that, but do you remember the 2 soldiers that were killed outside of Mezzanine Barracks in Belfast? Mm. So they, so that was that the last time the IRA attacked soldiers? I think it may have been. So they were killed, and everybody was moved forward. I was moved forward onto an earlier flight because obviously the people from their unit who were witnesses and stuff like that now had to be interviewed and all that sort of stuff. So those 2 guys being killed actually moved my flight a week earlier.
What year was this?
2009.
2009, yeah. Yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah.
I forget the names.
So, yeah. So I went out to Afghanistan. Been out there probably about a week, 2 weeks. And my boss, Percy, comes up and says, Geordie, mate, have you got a risk assessment for being here? And I was like, risk assessment? He went, yeah, a risk assessment. He says, for your AS. He says, being on tour. And I was like, I didn't know I needed a risk assessment. And he was like, nobody speak to you about this. And I was like, no. And he went, you're supposed to have a risk assessment for being here. I said, well, who do I get it from? He says, well, it's supposed to be from the MO back in Belfast.
The medical officer.
The medical officer. And I was like, no, mate. And he went, right. He says, you're going to have to go. He says, because technically you're not supposed to be out here right now without a risk assessment. And I was like, oh, okay. Could have mentioned that like 10,000 miles away. So I was like, right, okay. So I went through to the medical centre in Bastion, and the MO there was like, well, the only person who can really make this call is your specialist. So I rang the specialist, who at the time was Dr. Jones at Headley Court, and he turned around and he was like, I'll just get your notes up, because obviously he's got a lot of patients, and he's like, the last time I spoke to you, didn't I recommend med discharge? I was like, forget I called, bye. Put the phone down on him and spent the rest of the tour trying to avoid calls from him.
Really?
Right. We managed to get it signed off. So the arrangement was I could stay out there on tour. I could go to FOBs. I could go anywhere as long as I wasn't physically patrolling on the ground. Right. And that included vehicles, unfortunately. So my tour ended up being probably the most luxurious flipping Herrick tour of the world. Was just taken by helicopter from place to place to place. So just call me General Geordie. But I still managed to.
Wait. Did you give yourself that name, or did the others actually call you that?
No, nobody actually. I've just said that.
You just thought of it.
The tour was actually really good. So what I started doing, because it was a combat logistics support tour, it was. Have you seen the videos of like the really long patrols of vehicles going across the desert? And they, like, at one point we had one where the front of the patrol was in contact, the back of the patrol was in contact, the middle of the patrol was in contact, and each of the contacts were completely separate because of how long the patrol was. I think some of them were over probably 8 or 9 miles.
Vehicles or personnel?
The length, no, vehicles.
Vehicles, so the convoy.
Yeah, the convoy.
Yeah.
So it was just absolute bedlam.
What kind of vehicles were they in those?
So it started off as being predominantly drops.
Okay.
And then we done an op from Bastion to Kandahar, where we took all the drops and then swapped them out to EPLS, the new
man trucks.
Yeah, the man trucks, right? And
what would we call drops for anyone that's never used them? Because there's only support units and engineers. It's what do they call them? It's basically got a big hook at the back that picks up a pallet.
It picks up a pallet or a box or something or a box body.
I forgot what they're called.
Pick up and drop off.
I don't know. Pick up big ISO containers and things like that.
So yeah, predominantly those vehicles, and then there was like the flipping the standard man trucks, and the flipping like big recovery vehicles and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so what I would do is I would go out as liaison. So I would fly like as a pre-advance by helicopter, and then land in the location that they were driving to. So I was there ready to receive them coming in, and I would orchestrate the replan and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So
what helicopters?
You see again?
What helicopters?
No, the convoys.
Oh no! But you said you were being flown around.
Yeah.
What helicopters were you?
Oh, it's predominantly Chinooks.
Oh, okay.
Nothing flipping flash. I didn't get to sit on the wing of an Apache. So that's apparently that. You look on that, it says Reserve Royal Marines.
Does it?
So, then that tour was really good. Quite a few of the guys had close moments. obviously Op Herrick 10, which was the Herrick I was out on, was the main push to get the Taliban out of the green zone. And we got absolutely smashed up. So so the British Army took a lot of casualties during that. So it was quite a not directly stressful for me, but it was quite a hectic tour. So, and then that tour was cut short quite abruptly when I came off a quad bike. So I'd love to tell everyone that I was like being the warriest man alive and I was single-handedly fighting off a Taliban attack with nothing more than foul language and a sharp pencil, right? No, what actually happened was I came off a quad. I was wearing full kit and equipment, and I ruptured all but one ligament in my knee. My knee just basically blew up like a balloon. I tried dealing with it, couldn't do that. Went to see the medical staff. They then sent me off to get assessed, and it was the morning on the Monday. I think it was about 8:30 in the morning, and by 6 o'clock that evening, I was on a flight out of Afghanistan. So, and that was had to have full surgery, full knee rebuild.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Which was in the full knee surgery was in this February of 2010.
Okay.
So by this time, my wife, she was also a soldier. So she just finished doing winter maintenance in Canada, fixing the tanks and stuff. And because she was a mechanic, and she was in pre-deployment training to go out and do Op Herrick 13. And the week before her deployment, she had a motorcycle accident, and basically she was going around the left-hand blind bend. There was a car overtaking a lorry. He hit her head on. She flew through the air, hit the floor. She ruptured the femoral artery in her right leg, shattered her pelvis, dislocated her shoulder. If you ask her, the worst injury was the fact that she chipped her tooth. Died twice at the side of the road, and things like that. So by this time, my unit had come back from Afghanistan. I'd had my surgery. I was all sorted, and I was running the range down in Ballykinler in Northern Ireland. And I got the phone call from a girl, and the call basically went along the lines of, "Hi, my name's Gemma. You don't know us. Nikki's had a really, really bad accident. I've got to go. I'm trying to keep her conscious." And that was the call.
Wow.
And I was like, what the fuck? But at this point, my mate Ali had given everybody command to flipping look for targets, but I hadn't actually flipping pushed the button because obviously my mind was on other things. And Ali stood out the window looking at me, like hands out to the side, going, "What the hell's going on?" And I walked out. I said, "Nikki's had an accident. I'm going."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Right, okay." So I whinged like fuck about the army, complained about the army no end. The Joint Compassionate System, so the Joint Compassionate something cell, I can't remember what it is, JCCC, when their system kicked in, it was unbelievable. Really, really good. So
what do they support and what do they do?
So the JCCC are the people who, if a soldier is injured, killed or anything like that, they're the people that give compassionate support to the families and the soldiers and stuff like that. So, for example, they wouldn't act until Nikki's condition had been confirmed to them, which is understandable because you don't want to rush someone halfway across the UK just if somebody's like broken a finger. Nikki went, because of the rupture in the femoral artery and stuff like that, she had to have surgery, and I think it was about 4.5 hours of surgery just to save her life. Obviously, this whole thing's going on, so the JCCC can't do anything because they don't know what's going on. While this is going on, I made my way back to Belfast, and I was told, "Look, pack a bag, just be on standby, we'll see what happens." So I had a bag packed, and I'm just sat there coming up with contingencies. So I'm looking for flights online, looking at ferries and all the rest of it. And I remember my mate saying, my boss saying, don't bother doing that, because if they need to, they will charter you a flight. And I was like, they're not going to do that. So we got the news. What time was it? It was probably about 3:45. We got the news that Nikki was what was categorised as VSI, very seriously injured, which means life-threatening potential, high potential of death. And the welfare officer came, picked me up. As we drove out of camp, he said, look, there's a phone there. Picked up the phone, speed dial 2, and that took me direct to the commanding officer, which was Colonel Phillips. And the CO was like, you need anything. He says, you dial me directly. I was like, right. He said, you don't worry about work. He says, we can work without you. He said, you just concentrate on your wife. So I was like, right, okay. So they drove me round to Belfast City. I was straight on a flight from Belfast City to Birmingham. There was a car waiting for me next to the plane once I landed. I then got into that car. They then drove me round to a waiting helicopter, straight into the helicopter, and the helicopter went line of sight straight from Birmingham to Salisbury District, where Nikki was. When we landed, there was a guy. I got out the thing, and he went, and this guy was looking really glum, and he went, Mr. Paterson, and I was like, fuck, they're going to tell me that she's gone in the time that we've been in the air. And he went, your wife's waiting, follow me. So we got up to intensive care, and that's when I was put in a room by the staff nurse. And the staff nurse said, look, if there's anything that you want to say to your wife, you need to say it to her tonight. And I was like, what do you mean? She went, we're not expecting her to see the morning. And I was like, you know how you sat there like 12 hours ago, I was on the range, I didn't have a care in the world.
Yeah.
What the fuck's going on? So went into intensive care. Have you ever seen intensive care?
Not in person.
So intensive care it's awe-inspiring in one way, but tragic in another. In the fact that it's tragic if you're in there because you are literally on the doorstep of death. But it's awe-inspiring in the fact that you have a nurse sat at the bottom of the bed watching you, right? Literally sat there watching the obs, just doing everything. And it's that one nurse for that one patient. And I got in, and Nikki had so many drips and so many flipping, like, everything, so much stuff going into her body that they even had to put it into her feet because she didn't have enough available flipping space on her arms and stuff. And she opened her eyes and she went, what took you so long? And I was like, I says, what day do you think it is? She went, it's Friday. I went, no, it's still Thursday. Because she thought it was the day after.
Did she? Wow.
Right? Because she was on massive amounts of morphine because she shattered her whole pelvis. Basically what had happened was the impact, she'd gone into the fuel tank of the bike. The impact of her hitting the fuel tank had actually physically ripped the fuel tank off the bike. But her whole pelvis had just shattered. And basically tried, because she was on the motorbike with her knee bent, it tried to force the femur up through the back of the pelvis. She was told categorically without the leathers, it would have ripped her leg off. So the impact of the whole accident was she was left paralysed in the right leg. So all the damage, she basically tore all the nerves in the right side of the SIJ. So her right leg was paralysed from the hip down. Her left leg was okay. She then had to go through, as she was going through all the surgeries and stuff like that, I stopped counting at 220 hours under anaesthetic. So, because it was just like, why am I counting? I'm counting for what's it doing? It's just made me depressed. So, and I got quite sick of just pacing hospital corridors or sitting in the Costa Coffee in hospitals.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a massive sort of curveball. One thing I massively appreciated was once a week I would get 2 phone calls. One would be from my commanding officer, one would be from my regimental sergeant major, and both of them said, look, you need anything, you give us a shout. So the The JCCC system, as I said, got me to Nikki's bedside in literally less than 3 hours from Belfast. Also, because Nikki was in hospital and things like that, I had to be fairly close, so that put me up in hotels that were quite local. She had to move from Salisbury to the trauma hospital, which was in Bristol, so at Frenchie. So she moved across there. They put me up in hotels, but it ended up when the first night I was there, where Nikki had come out of intensive care and stuff like that, so she wasn't in danger of dying anymore and things like that. And I was like, hotels, yeah, okay, I can do this. By the end of the first month, I was like, I hate hotels. I just hate hotels. So I had an agreement with Nikki that I would go in and see her every visiting time in the morning, every visiting time in the evening, but on a Sunday, I would go home. Because we had our house in Tidworth at this point.
I was going to say, where was that? Yeah.
So I would drive back to Tidworth, and what that meant is then I could wash my clothes, sleep in my own bed, and just chill out. So done that. So Nikki was in hospital. When did she come out? She come out early December, I think. So what we made the arrangement with work with 19 CSS, they sorted me out a posting to 4 Battalion REME in Tidworth. So they were like, look, you're just going to be transferred there so they can administer you easier, but we understand that you're not going to be back in work for quite some time. So after that...
and that's 2010?
That was 2010, yeah. So she had the accident at 13:20 on the 2nd of September, 2010.
Okay. And you get posted in the
And I got posted in the December.
Of 2010, yeah.
So, and then, so she went through her whole rehabilitation and stuff like that. In 2012, she made the decision to have the leg amputated through the knee initially. And the reason why is it was just a lump of meat that she was just dragging around. She was away doing adventure training. She was and she fractured her femur, and because she was paralysed, she didn't know she'd done it. So it was just the bruising and stuff like that which brought attention to it. So she waited. She was actually abroad when she'd done it. She waited till she came back to England before she went to the hospital about it. Wheeled in, transferred onto the bed. They x-rayed her. They wouldn't let her get off the bed because they were worried that the femur would rupture the femoral artery. So another operation to have it pin and plated. Literally, she's just like a walking scar now. Another operation to have it pin and plated, and they put a cast on her, which, in hindsight, is a pretty stupid thing to do. But we were sat at home. She's on the sofa. She's got her feet on us, and I'm like, "What the hell is that smell?" I was like, "That's rank. What the hell is that?" And I smelled her foot. I was like, "Is that your foot?" I was like, "We need to get that seen to quick." So we took her to A&E. A&E took her, basically cut off the plaster, and it caused a pressure sore on the heel of her right leg. And obviously, because she was paralysed, she couldn't feel it. But it had basically had gone dead, and it'd been sat in its own rotting flesh for about a week, and it'd been infected. And the infection had travelled, and then the infected... When they tried cutting out all the infected tissue, I knew there was a problem when the guy went, "Oh." I went, "What?" And he went, "I'm at the bone." I was like, "What?" He says, "I'm at the bone." And I still remember looking into the hole in her heel and seeing the bone there, the heel bone. That was all infected. Well, after you get a bone infection, the only way you can truly guarantee that that bone infection is gone is by getting rid of the bone. So they basically amputated and went through the knee. So it's where they separate the femur from the fib and tib. So yeah, she had that. To be honest, that was probably one of the better operations she had, and the reason why is because it meant she wasn't dragging around this big lump of flipping meat anymore. And and she was told by everybody, well, by quite a few at Headley Court, that doing that is a really stupid idea because she won't be able to use a prosthetic because she's paralysed and stuff like that. So in true Nikki form, the week that she got her prosthetic, I mean, it wasn't clean and wasn't tidy by any stretch of the imagination, but she walked into the physio's office wearing the prosthetic and said to all you that said I couldn't walk, fuck you, and turned around and walked out. So
Good for her. Good for her.
And that's pretty much how she went. So, and then she went on to do para canoe.
Nice.
So she was 3 times world silver medalist.
Very good.
Kept on getting beaten by Emma Wiggs, who was her training partner, which really annoyed her.
Well, maybe one day we'll get her on the podcast. Who knows? So
yeah,
we won't steal her.
I think she'll be up for that.
We won't steal her thunder.
So,
but as for you, you'd been posted to 4 Battalion at that time.
Yeah.
So was you there for the rest of your career, or what happened?
No. So the time at 4 Battalion, 4 Battalion were really, really good. As Nikki was going through all of her, because obviously it was a lot of time for me as well.
Supporting you, supporting her type thing, yeah.
On a personal side, I probably took the psychological side of her accident worse than she did, because she had to concentrate on this, that and the other. And she had all these people supporting her and everything, whereas I didn't really have much in the way of support at all.
Fair.
And I took it really bad. And I went through a lot of, and this probably is where a lot of the psych issues started, because I blamed myself. So she was on a motorcycle that I got her into bikes. I helped her get a license and all that sort of stuff, and I blamed myself. I mean, even if I was there, I don't know what I could have done, but I you know how screwed up we get at times, so I blame myself.
Okay.
But the problem is I didn't tell anybody. I just sat on it, and I didn't tell Nikki because, as far as I was concerned, she had her own problems.
Yeah.
So, so this started sort of bubbling away in the background. In the meantime, working at 4 Battalion, I was in the training wing, so I was running training and letting sort of pre-deployment training, doing your sort of basic level training exercises that you have to do. Getting people ready for promotional courses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So the time at 4 Battalion was actually quite good. But the problem is 4 Battalion was still an operational unit. And being attached to an operational unit, especially in the situation that I was with Nikki, I needed stability and to know that I wasn't going to go anywhere last minute.
To keep your state of mind a little bit more steady, I suppose.
So, yeah. Well, the thing is, like I say, I wasn't telling anybody that I was going through all of this stuff at the time. So, so with that, I've been promoted by this time to sergeant, and I was like, right, okay, I need a posting that's going to get me sort of settled. And my boss turned around and said, look, there's a posting coming up at Army headquarters. And I went, right. And he went, truth is, he says, you're going to absolutely fucking hate it. I was like, right. He says, it's a desk job. You're going to hate it. It's not active. He said, it's not used anything like what he says. But he said, for your current personal situation with Nikki, he went, it's ideal. They don't go on tour. They don't deploy. He says, there's not much in the way of duties. And I was like, right, okay. And that's Army headquarters where we met.
Where we met, yeah.
Yeah, so, which was doing a job which, I am not going to lie, I absolutely hated.
I agree.
Yeah.
I concur.
Yeah, it was basically a hideous data input job.
At a desk, literally.
Stuck at a desk with, I'm not going to name any names, but with a boss who literally had about as much man management skill as a dead rat. And also what didn't help is the senior that was supposed to be our top cover was very, very weak. So, but like I say, I'm not
Again,
going to name any names.
it's still fresh, right? So, let's not name any names.
No.
But I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it served a purpose.
Absolutely.
You needed a place to get stability, and that's kind of the reason I went there as well, because I needed my hips to be replaced. Blah blah blah. But and you know that. So,
Yeah.
but it serves its purpose for us regulars, right? That if you are seeing out the end of your career, or you have something at home like you had, then having a desk job is there for that reason, I suppose. And sure, we miss the regular army, the field army, but I suppose from there, was you able to then kind of battle your mental state, or?
No, because I was refusing to admit I had problems.
Still now?
Yeah.
Still that
So,
time?
I refused to admit. I mean, there was that and a few other things and stuff. And Nikki would constantly mention that how like angry I was and things like that, and I just shrug it off and just like, oh, she's being overreactive and stuff like that. So, yeah, and being at Army headquarters was good because I got to look after her, but being in a job that I absolutely detested didn't help at all.
No.
So it just basically, and me being the typical squaddy, right? Yeah, I'm fine. I'll just get on with it. I'll just suck it up. I'll just man up and get on with it, right? It was just making it worse. But once Nikki got to a point where she was independent, she was going to training all the time. She'd basically moved up to Nottingham because that's where GB Paracanoe train. So she moved up there and stuff like that. It meant that I could then look at what I wanted to do. So I then applied for a posting, and I remember this coming through, and I remember my posting coming through earlier than it was supposed to be. It was 6 months earlier, and I remember our boss actively trying to stop it. And they went, no, it's not going to happen because he's going in a deployment role. And the job was I was going, and this was the last job I had in the army, which was as a pre-deployment instructor. So instructing soldiers that were going on deployment, taking them through everything from basic weapon skills to advanced weapon skills, tactics, first aid, map reading. And I was one of only sort of 20 instructors in the army in a thing called CNBD, which is Communication, Negotiation and Behavioural Detection, which was the psychology of dealing with people, gaining empathy, gaining rapport, and things like that. And it's basically how can you manipulate people to get what you want when you're on deployment and things like that. Because the army have now realised that not every situation calls for a loaded rifle to be able to fix. So that I really enjoyed working at 19CS at MTMC.
What year did you move up there?
So that was January 2015 I moved there. And that was my last posting. Whilst I was there, I mean, the job itself was great. I loved the physical job. I loved the guys I was working with. I enjoyed being, because it was in Nottingham, so it was perfect for me. But throughout all of this, I still wasn't dealing with my own problems. And throughout all of that, it was a case of, I mean, in 2015, Nikki convinced me to go and speak to a psychologist, a shrink. And his notes say, Gareth is just saying what he thinks I want to hear. And that's all it says. And I'd done that because I didn't believe I had a problem.
Okay.
Things got to a head in 2017. It was January 2017. Nikki was away with the GB squad doing acclimatization for Rio if she got selected for the Paralympics. And I was in a really, really bad place. And I was sat upstairs in the bedroom, manically depressed, couldn't see a way out, and I was going to cut my femoral artery with a Stanley knife, because obviously teaching first aid, you know that when you've cut that, there's no way that anyone can rescue you. And it was my dog Loki barking that sort of snapped me out of it. and it was the sudden, who's going to look after Loki if I do this? And Loki was barking and pawing at the door. He knew something was up. So Nikki had come back a few days later, Nikki had come back from Rio, and she said to me, she said she could tell something had changed. And she was like, have you tried to hurt yourself? And apparently I just looked through her. And she went, look, you do understand now that that's not right. There is something wrong. You need to. And that was the fuck moment. That was the shit, I need help. So I had to swallow. And that's pretty much what it was. It was pride. Right? I didn't want to admit that I was struggling. I didn't want to. So I had to swallow all of this sort of man up pride and go and speak to a shrink. I was placed on I can't remember the name of the drugs. I was put on some drugs to basically, the analogy that the shrink used was, your brain is like a house, and with the damage and things like that you've done to it and had done to it over the years, your house needs to be rebuilt, but you need to put scaffolding around it to help rebuild it. You can't do it from where it is. And those drugs were scaffolding, because I was really worried. Like, you hear all the flipping, the horror stories from people that have taken them and stuff like that. So, yeah, I did take them. Unfortunately, because of how much of I can't even say a bit of an arse, and I was not a nice person to be around. Nikki, the irony that I was trying what I could to help her by hiding everything, but actually making the situation so much worse by my angry outbursts and how just nasty I was all the time. I was never happy. I could have won the lottery, right? And then gone outside to find a flipping free Ferrari parked on my drive, right? And I'd still would have just been grumpy as sin, right? I just wasn't happy in anything. So unfortunately, me and Nikki's relationship or marriage broke down. So we're still friends. We still talk. I chat to her quite regularly, and things like that. So what happened from there was we still lived in the same house. We even still slept in the same bed. We just went from being husband and wife to being friends. So, or really good friends. So, so at the end of my career in the army and MTMC, when I left that quarter that we were living in, and me and Nikki, then I got helped Nikki move into a new house and stuff like that. That was my complete break clean point. That was my, right, I'm officially, and I've got a photograph of me stood outside of the gate of the camp, and it's me, homeless, single, and unemployed, all in within one day. And it's like the whole, right, I don't have anywhere to go now but up. Right. So I now have to stop being such a stop planning, and the other problem was I was putting so much effort into helping other people. I never dealt with myself. And the reason why is because I didn't want to. I didn't want to look inside. I didn't want to fix myself. So
from that day, in your mind, the only way's up, right?
Exactly.
Do you remember the date?
That was, so I left the army on the 3rd of August, but we didn't leave the quarter until the 18th of August. So I think it was the 18th of August. So yeah, I think that was the 18th of August.
Of what year?
2018.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that's quite a whirlwind, that last kind of
yeah,
that last chunk there. And I'm just going to ask if we can step back slightly. Okay. So we've literally come to the end of your career, and you've seen a lot, you've done a lot. You've supported Nikki through her accident.
Yep.
You've gone through surgery yourself. You've done an awful lot. But during that last phase of your career, did you have anything that was distracting you from looking at your mental health? Did you have sports? Did you have hobbies or anything like that that were kind of trying to keep you away from tackling mental health?
So one of the things that when I was seeing the shrink in 2015, where I was just telling him what he want, one of the things he did say to me, he was like, "What are you doing outside of work?" And I was like, "Well, nothing." And he said, "You're probably better off finding a hobby that can get you out and about, meet people, or find a hobby that just gets you separated from everyone and gets you out and stuff like that." And when we were at Army headquarters, you organised because I know obviously you're a big archer, you organised a have a go archery.
I did.
And I was like, I really enjoyed that. And I think, did I win that? I think I won that competition as well.
I think you did as well, yeah.
Right? So I was like, do you know what? I'm in Nottingham, which is like the home of archery. It's the Robin Hood, for God's sake. I was like, so do you know what? I'll give archery a whirl. So I just basically blanket emailed all the archery clubs in the area. They were all saying, I'm sorry, we don't have any spaces. And then a club called Burton Joyce Archers sent me an email on the Sunday evening and said, look, we've literally just had someone drop out. If you're interested and you can make it tomorrow evening, right, and we'll sort out all the details then. So I went down, done their beginner's course, and after that I got into archery, and I threw myself fully because towards the later time, like with Nikki and stuff like that, I mean, prior to Nikki's accident and things, me and her used to go climbing all the time and things. After that, the climbing sort of fizzled out, and climbing is definitely one of those sports that you need to keep up with regularly, otherwise you lose climbing fitness very quickly. So not doing it for a long time, I found the times that I did try it, I was just getting frustrated. So I threw myself fully into the archery. I would literally finish work, go home, pick up my archery equipment, and sod off down to the archery range till 9-10 o'clock, and then come back. The camp that I was on, I was lucky in the fact that we had a massive hangar, so I took a portion of that hangar and had my own target and stuff like that. So it was a case of, that was a help but also a hindrance to my mental health, because I threw myself so much into it. I wasn't dealing with the problem, with the issues. But as I said, I wasn't accepting I had issues at the time. So, so got into the archery, done relatively well in it. And then obviously, on the back of how well you done with Invictus, I was away at the Army Sports Awards with Nikki at the time, and Martin Colclough, who's the head of sports recovery for Help for Heroes, said to me, and he said, "Oh, you're doing archery now, aren't you?" Nikki said, and I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Why don't you try going for the Invictus Games?" And I was like, "Well, no, the Invictus Games is for people who are combat wounded." He went, "No, it's for wounded, injured, sick." He said, "You've got AS." He says, "Plus you've also struggling mentally." He said, "So you fit the bill on two sides." So I was like, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't, being pretty sort of nonchalant about it. And Nikki was like, "I think you should go for it. I'll give you something to focus on." So I applied. Luckily got selected. And then afterwards, I got an email that said, "We'd like you to apply as a captain or vice captain." Well, I thought it was just a blanket email, so I just ignored it. Right? Like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I got an email back about 3 days later that went, "Gareth, we're still waiting." I was like, "What?" So I applied, didn't want to go as a captain, because I was like, personally, I think that should be somebody who's combat injured. So somebody who's had to have a massive change in their life, like they've lost limbs or whatever. But I was like, so I got selected as a vice captain.
Nice.
So,
So hang on a sec. You get selected for the team, for Team UK. And what Invictus is this? This is the one after mine.
This is Invictus 16, yeah.
So this is Orlando 2016.
Yeah.
So not only do you get selected for the first Invictus you try out for, which is awesome, you then get to be Mr. Vice Captain.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So, lots of training. So we spent quite a bit of time training down in Stoke Mandeville and stuff like that. And I remember you swearing at me because of how quickly I was advancing. What I wasn't telling you is I was advancing so much because I literally wasn't doing anything else.
Yeah.
I was just shooting.
I'm just going to add some stuff to this. So I didn't know about you essentially locking yourself away and just doing archery.
I was very, very good at hiding it.
Yeah.
So everybody used to say, I was basically two people. I was Gareth that everybody knew, the happy, bouncy, carrying on, flipping everything's a joke.
Yeah.
Right? Instructor, all the rest of it. And then at home, I was a complete different person. And that person at home was not a nice person at all. So, and to be honest, I think I was spending so much time away with doing the shooting. If I wasn't at the range, I was in the hangar and stuff like that, because I didn't want to be that bad person around Nikki.
Okay.
Right? But unfortunately, you have to be because you're married and you live together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I didn't know you were doing all of that. So obviously I was annoyed that you were catching me and sometimes beating me, and yeah, that's probably why I might have said a few words. But no, it was great to see that you were getting so good at a sport that obviously I love, and that you found as a great way to kind of focus on new goals, which is the whole reason that I picked it up, because I couldn't do my previous stuff that I wanted to do. So yeah, back to you with your training and working towards going out to Orlando.
Yeah, so lots of shooting. I mean, a ridiculous amount of shooting. I was lucky in that Help for Heroes sponsored me, so I managed to get, because my first setup I bought myself, and I bought it off eBay, right? It wasn't the right setup. It wasn't. I think I was using it was like a small riser with long limbs, and like the setup was completely wrong, right? And I remember a guy at my club called Shy. He was going, mate, you shouldn't be able to shoot with that. It's just wrong. And I'm like, well, I'm doing all right. And he's like, yeah, you're doing all right, but you're just wrong. And then obviously once the support from Help for Heroes came through and I got the proper kit that was actually fitted to me and correct, that obviously improved again. And then, went out to Orlando in, I think it was May 2016. So I only went out to do purely archery. And the other thing was I'm quite pleased because the amount of time being vice captain took up. So David Wisey was the captain. And Wisey spent a lot of time doing the sort of forward-facing stuff, whereas I was doing all the internal deal with the bullshit type stuff. I mean, I even had one of the team members' wives come up. And she's like, I want to work with you. I was like, what? She went, you've been interviewed by the BBC. I was like, yeah. She goes, why? I was like, well, I'm the vice captain. I said, I've won 2 gold medals. I've turned out, I've done well. And she says, my husband hasn't been interviewed by the BBC. I went, well, what's he done? She went, well, nothing. I said, has he won anything yet? And she went, no. I was like, so you want the BBC to interview him and say, this is your husband. He's doing all right. I says, that's not telling a story. And I was like, unfortunate. And I says, the other problem is, I says, I'm the UK team vice captain. It doesn't say BBC producer on my top. So, and that was the sort of stuff guys who suffered with sleep apnea being put in the same room as guys who had chronic fatigue. So the guys who had chronic fatigue, who needed sleep badly, put in a room with a guy who snored with a machine that revved and flipping went all night. So it was things like having to deal with that, where stuff that hadn't been thought of. And so I spent a lot of time. I mean, the Invictus that I'd done was quite a busy time out. The whole time I was out there, I had 1 day downtime where I could actually go off and do something. So I went to a gun range. Why not?
I'm just going to jump in there. So this is you again, considering that you've just spent all of your career pretty much doing this. helping others. You've just glanced over something, got 2 gold medals. Can you just not just like stop for a second, appreciate what you've achieved, and tell us a little bit about that? Because 2 gold medals in archery in your first Invictus is an amazing thing. And I'd love to hear, I'm sure others would too.
So, yeah, so I was shooting good enough to take part in the Open Championship. But because I'd been shooting less than a year, Martin Colclough said, look, I've got a question. And he went, you can tell me to sod off if you want. And I went, what? And he said, we want you to shoot as a novice. So a novice shoots a slightly different setup to what the Open did. And it's a more basic. It's the same for me. It was the same bow, but it was basic. So you didn't have all the little ancillaries that take out all the vibration. You don't have bits and pieces to help support you and stabilize everything and things like that. And I was like, right, okay. He said, so we want you to shoot as a novice. And I was like, right. He said, we genuinely think you've got a good chance to get a medal. So I was like, right, okay. So I was sat there thinking about it, and I was like, but I want to shoot in the Open because that's the really competitive one. And then it was sat there, and I thought, you know what? Taking it on the chin like that for the team will help us lift our medal count. So I was like, right, fair enough. And I was like, and to be honest, I'm not going to be the only guy. So obviously in your Invictus, there was Fabio. Mm-hmm. Right, which they all thought he was a ringer, right? Because Fabio like wiped the floor with everybody, didn't he? And he was in as a novice. Fabio had only been shooting 8 months because I'm actually friends with Fabio. He'd only been shooting 8 months, so and everybody thought he was a ringer. And I was like, well, I'll go in as the new ringer, I suppose. So
I think you asked that question to a few of us as well. I think you asked us what should I do?
Yeah, because I didn't know.
Yeah, and I told you. You've not been shooting for a year, so utilize that.
Yeah,
win.
Yeah, I said that. It was the comment of you only get one opportunity to shoot as a novice.
Yes, I did tell you.
And I was like, that's very true. Like, if I go in as Open, I'll never ever get the opportunity to go in as a novice. So I decided I would go as a novice. So I stripped everything off my bow, right down to you weren't even allowed a pressure button and things like that.
Yeah.
Which to anybody who does archery knows that having a pressure button is a massive thing on your bow. So went into the individual event. I came first. Martin Clapton came second, and then Nick Mounier from Canada, who's an absolute legend. I've got loads of time. In fact, Nick actually messaged me because he wants to come over and visit. So yeah, we done really well. And then in the final, which what they didn't tell me, and I'm pleased they didn't, was the final was in front of, I think it was 1,500 people live. And it was televised to over 15 million. Right? I was like, thank God you didn't tell me that when I was actually there.
Yeah.
Had Matt Stutzman commentating. So for those of you who don't know Matt Stutzman, he's a world famous Paralympian archer who's got no arms. He shoots using his feet. He's phenomenal. So Matt was the commentator. So I've got like one of the best archers in the world commentating on my competition. So they had Martin Clapton versus Sarah from the Canadian team in the bronze match. And the winner of that gets the bronze and the loser of that gets nothing. Luckily, Martin won that one. And then it was me versus Nick in the gold medal match. And they screwed up the buzzers. So it's actually on YouTube. If you watch it back, you'll see me walk out, walk back, walk out. And they beeped, right? And I walked forward and he turned around and said, no, he says it's the wrong beep. So I walk back, right? It then beeps again. And he's like, no, that's not the right one. And then it beeps again. And he goes, right, go. And I went forward. You know the 5 seconds you get to go from the waiting line to the shooting line? They missed that out on my one. So where you normally have 20 seconds to do a shot, I had less than 20 seconds to walk from the waiting line to the shooting line, get set up, and do my shot. So my first shot went low. So subsequently, in the first round, I'm just trying to play catch up against Nick, who's a phenomenal shot. So Nick won the first round. I won the second round. Nick won the third round. I won the fourth round. And at that point, you go to a 1 arrow shoot off. So a 1 arrow shoot off is exactly as it says on the tin. Each archer gets 1 arrow. They change the targets. So if it bounces out, you can still see the hole. And it's the closest one to the center. It's basically what you used to play in the darts with your kids. So I shot and I scored an X, which is a high 10. So basically, I think my shot was probably only a centimetre off the dead centre.
Nice.
Nick shot and he scored a 9, which subsequently meant I got to win.
Was you nervous on that last shot?
Petrified.
Yeah.
So, but it's one of those where that I sat there and I was like, right, okay. So do you remember we used to talk a lot about shot routine and going through everything? Mm-hmm. I never understood why write it down, why do this, why do that, until that moment of all that pressure.
Yeah.
And the thing is that this whole competition had overrun. So this competition I'm doing, I think it was about 9:15 at night. So it was a late one. So then we went into the team event, and the team event is staged from your scores in the individuals. So we had myself, who's just won the gold, Martin, who's just won bronze, and then Matt Elliott, who hadn't even been out there. So Matt Elliott's petrified against the Canadians, where you had Nick, who'd just been beaten by me and gone into silver, Sarah, who'd just been beaten by Martin and got nothing, and then Adam, who was petrified and hadn't been out there. So when we went out, I remember waiting in the tunnel out the back before they called us out with all the smoke and stuff. And I remember saying to Matt and Matty, Martin and Matty, and just saying, look, we're already well ahead. We've beaten 2 of these already. So all we're going to do is go out there. So by the time we finished, for the final arrow in our competition, all Martin had to do was hit the target. That was it. So because we had such a lead, and knowing that you've won even before that final arrow is shot was really good. I mean, I've watched it back 1,000,001 times, I'll be honest. And I sit there, right, and you can hear me and Matt chatting, and it's like, he's just got to hit the board. And I was like, yeah. I was like, but it's that picture up there. Martin stood in such a way where I'm like trying to chat away from him because I don't want him to hear what we're saying, because I don't want to put more pressure on him than he already had. So, yeah, went for 2 medals, came back with 2 golds, which was good.
Very good, very good.
And then, 2017, I was lucky I got selected for Invictus 17 as well in Toronto.
Oh, nice. You went forward for that? You got selected as well?
Yeah,
nice.
Got selected. Didn't go as vice captain, but was selected as team captain of the archery team.
Nice.
So purely because of how well I'd done previously and the fact that I'd experienced everything that they went through.
Yeah. Just doing archery again, or was you doing other sports?
So no, just doing archery again. Obviously, this wasn't long after my proper breakdown.
Okay.
So I was dealing with all my psychological stuff at the time. And if you watch the videos if you compare the 2 videos, the 2016 and the 2017, you will think that it's a totally different person because I was massively overweight. I mean, I'm not flipping Beyonce by any stretch of the imagination now, but I was massively overweight. I was just chronically depressed. So, and I've done the Invictus to try and sort of give me that step up to try and improve myself.
To bring you back up.
Yeah.
So that was the thing in 2017, where you're in the room and then you get snapped out of it by the dog, which we hear that they can sense stuff, right? So I think that saved you.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of 2017, was it?
So that was the beginning of 2017.
So like January or something?
Yeah.
And then the Invictus of 2017 in Toronto.
September.
That's September.
Yeah,
Okay,
because I had my birthday out there.
Okay, nice.
So,
yeah, how was that experience? Was that all good?
So that was a really good. I mean, to be honest, it was a totally different experience. So Invictus in Orlando, the Americans had gone full on American on it, right? They had ESPN advertising. They had some of their top they had their top presenters from sports all over the country doing the individual sports. They'd literally taken over Disney World, right? We had our own resort, right? The worldwide, what was it? The ESPN worldwide of sports, right? The whole stadium thing was where they held it and things like that. And it was just Invictus wherever you went, right? Toronto they tried to make it just as big, but obviously trying to run it in the middle of a city and things like that. So it's still really, really good. In fact, I lied to you. I did do another event. I'd done the driving.
Okay.
So,
what's the driving?
So the driving is a mix. So they didn't tell us anything about it, right? It's run by Jaguar Land Rover. They don't tell you what events you're going to be doing or anything like that. And when you go, you don't even know what vehicles you're driving. So when we turned up, you're showing what you have to do and what you have to drive the morning of the event. So the two cars that I got to drive were the Jaguar F-Type SVR, 430 brake horsepower, 2-seater sports car, phenomenal machine. And that is through the speed and accuracy stage. So you have to go through specific gates in a specific order, but they don't tell you what gate it is until until you're just about to go through the previous one. So it's all about trying to pick very, very quickly which direction you're going to go, what angle you're going to take, what's the quickest way to go through it, and also you have to do it in the shortest distance. So it's shortest distance, quickest time, most accurate. So it can be literally a light flashes up, you turn right and you should have turned left, and your whole thing's ruined. Then the other one was the brand new Land Rover Discovery 5. It was brand new at the time, and that was across basically a vehicle obstacle course. So, which was absolutely brutal. So myself and Olaf, the UK team had never in the previous two Invictus won a medal in it. And myself and Olaf pulled silver, and we were pipped by the Dutch, and they beat us by 1 point.
Nice.
A single point.
Nice that you won something, but so close to getting that gold.
Absolutely.
How did you get picked for that then?
So they've done a selection day at Eastnor Castle. So Eastnor is in Herefordshire. And if you buy a brand new Jaguar Land Rover, so say you buy a Disco, right? You've got a lot of off-road capability there that they're going to just give you, and you're not going to be shown how to use. If you buy a brand new off-road vehicle, like a Velar or a flipping, or anything along those lines, you get included in the purchase price a day or a half day at Eastnor Castle, where they will take you out cross-country, off-road and all that sort of stuff, teach you how to drive it. So they ran a selection process at Eastnor Castle, and it wasn't easy. Wasn't easy at all. And myself and, do you know Olaf? Olaf Jones, he's a amputee. I think it's his left shoulder. His left shoulder's amputated.
Maybe.
So anyway, to which was a bit of a shock for a lot of people when they suddenly realised they got beaten off-road driving by a guy with one arm.
Yeah.
Right. So, but Olaf was a really, really good driver. So, so done that. And then...
And from that, they picked the team.
From that, they picked
the
that
pair.
the same day. It's all done on scores. And the same day, they then select the two people who were going to represent the team.
Nice.
So,
And they chose well because you got silver. So
I don't
good
know,
job,
right?
Good job.
So,
And then how did you do with archery at Toronto?
so I qualified second in the individuals, and as sport is, had an absolute shocker in the competition. As soon as I ended up, I put a couple of arrows wrong, which just completely threw me off. So unfortunately, I ended up 5th overall.
Okay.
And then in the team event, it was myself, Kieran Wood, and Matt Neve, and we won gold.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm a proud owner of 3 golds and 1 silver Invictus.
Very good, very good. And I remember that because weirdly I was out there on holiday.
You were actually, yeah.
And came
I
to
remember
support
that.
you for the
You did.
final. I remember watching that, and yeah, all 3 of you looked very proud on that step, picking up that gold medal. So yeah, very proud moment. And for me, watching you, because I still technically, I'm the reason you got into it.
You are, yeah, yeah.
And I like seeing people succeed. So it's awesome. Wow. We've pretty much covered an awful lot throughout your whole career, seeing Invictus help you get through. And then you leave the military in 2018.
I did, yeah.
And so we're now in 2020. What was that transition like for you? Was it quite kind of easy? You mentioned about being outside that camp, jobless, single, and what was the third one you said?
Unemployed.
That's jobless.
Unemployed, single, and homeless.
And homeless.
Yeah.
So what was that transition back to civilian life for you?
Well, it could probably be made a lot easier without being unemployed, homeless, and single in one go. So I decided that I was going to start planning my resettlement and my transition about a year before I left. Once I signed off, I was like, right, okay, that's it. So for those of you who don't know, signing off is when you formally hand in your notice to the army, and you have to give a minimum of 365 days notice. So,
and this was you
this
signed
is
off at
2017.
2017, yeah. And you'd completed 24 when you left. Okay, yeah.
So I was like, right, okay, what do I want to do? So I came up with these ideas that I was going to I went on a business course. I came up with the idea that I was going to open my own archery coaching range where people could turn up, shoot, do this, that, and the other, and stuff like that. Unfortunately, during that business course, I suddenly realized that the throughput that I would have to have in that range and the prices that I would have to have in that range to make it a valid business option was just unrealistic. I'd have to have, I think it was something like 150 people turning up, shooting per day just for the overheads. And that was even before I paid myself a wage. So it wasn't realistic at all. So it gets to December and I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. And a friend of mine said, look, you're a geek. You've always been a geek. You always will be a geek. And I was like, right. And he went, have you ever heard of penetration testing? And I was like, penetration testing? And I started giggling like a child because he said penetration. And I'm always one for an innuendo.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. He says, look into it. He said, if you want to know any more, give me a shout, all that sort of stuff. So what penetration testing is, or pen testing, just to make it sound less disgusting. A pen tester is a person who is hired by a business or a company to hack their computer systems, to try and penetrate the computer systems. So you're basically a legal hacker. You're given permission by the business, you try and hack it, and then whatever you find or don't find, you then write a report on that, and then that business then mitigate the things that you found, and it's planned in the way that I will try and hack it in the way that a hacker will, to try and stop, because if I can close the doors before they go through, then we can do it that way. The problem is there is no straightforward way into being a pen tester. If you want to be a truck driver, you go and do your theory test, you go and do some lessons, you go and take your test. Right? If you want to be a surgeon, right, you go off, you go to university, you study medicine, you study biology, right, you get your degree, then you have to go into the trade. there's pen testing. There isn't a set way, right? There's no instant access course. There's no, you do that course, you can get a job as a pen tester. Then also it was like, well, where am I going to learn to do this? So I learned a surprising amount on the internet. So YouTube had quite a lot. There's quite a few specific now online libraries and things like that, specific to cybersecurity. So which is good. Obviously, when you leave, you go through the Career Transition Partnership. They really, really wanted to help. They did. They wanted to help with so much of their heart. But unfortunately, wanting to help isn't the same as helping. And they didn't know what courses I needed. They didn't know what to suggest. So I mean, if I still had access to it, I've still got my resettlement budget because I didn't touch it.
Yeah.
Because I was keeping it for a course that I didn't know if I needed and things like that. So I was lucky in the fact that I was put in touch with a couple of guys through LinkedIn who were ex-military, who'd got into cybersecurity. They put me in touch with other people. I grew a bit of a network of people who were in cybersecurity and stuff like that. And eventually got put onto a company called the Crucial Academy. Crucial Academy it was their very first course, and their plan was that it was aimed at ex-military, and we take you from never doing any cybersecurity before. It was a 3-week course, and at the end of it, we will try and give you a qualification in cybersecurity. So there was 250 people applied for the course. There was only 10 places. It wasn't just can you blag your way in by chatting. There was a technical interview where you had to go down to the offices. You sat there. They had a computer plugged into a projector, and they'd say, right, show me how you do this. And you would have to do it on the computer without any prompt or anything in front of them. And they could see exactly what you were doing on the computer screen, which was, for a person who had only learned the stuff that I'd learned on the internet, I was like, am I doing this right? I don't know. Luckily, I managed to get on the course. The course was mind-numbing, very, very technical. I was massively out of my depth. But it was the first time in a long time I actually applied myself academically, because I had a lot riding on it. I was like, if I don't get this qualification and I don't do this, I don't get a job. If I don't get a job, I'm screwed. So I had a lot riding on it. I passed the course, and then whilst I was homeless, I was living on in Chris's spare bedroom.
So a mate of yours,
a mate of mate.
Mate of mate.
Mutual mate, yeah. I was living in Chris's spare bedroom, and I had a recruiter get in touch with me who said, look, I think we can get you a job at this place. I was like, right, okay. So I had a telephone interview. I then had a technical interview, where the technical interview, good old technology, didn't work properly. So it turned into a technical interview without the technical side, which is actually harder because you have to physically explain what you would do as opposed to just showing you can do it. And then the final part was my formal interview, which was supposed to be an hour and a half and turned into 4 hours long.
Wow.
So, and yeah, at the end of it all, I was offered a job.
Nice.
So,
nice.
So as of November 2020, I've been working for the company as a pen tester.
Brilliant.
For 2 years. So
fantastic.
I get to hack people legally, which is nice.
So it sounds like you're in a nice stable position now.
Yes.
So that's good to hear. And just want to say that this has been quite a journey. Learned an awful lot, and I think you're still doing archery now. Just to briefly cover some last bits, because we've we've gone a long time, and I don't want people to
Yeah,
turn off now,
I'm
but-
distinctly. I didn't realise we'd gone that long. Wow.
But is there any last little bits that you want to share with people regarding veterans or anything like that?
If you're in a situation where everything looks bleak, everything looks really bad, and everything is like just to say it, everything just looks and feels shit, just believe that it does get better.
Okay,
In
good.
the end, it does. In 2017, I was literally I was my own worst enemy. My idea of hell was spending like time in my own presence. That was my idea of hell. Fast forward to now, I have a job which I really enjoy. In fact, I have a job that I adore. I enjoy getting up for work, which is something that I lost in the army towards the later time, especially when I was at army headquarters. And I then, I don't know whether it was just a moment of stupidity or what, but when I made myself homeless, single, and unemployed, I think that was my right. I have nowhere else to go but up from here. And that was where I was like, right, I'm now going to start doing shit for me and start looking after myself.
Good, yeah.
So, and that's where I was like, right, okay. So I started studying for myself. I started applying for jobs for myself. And then when the job came up, I was like, no, I will come to you. I will move to you because I had nothing keeping me anywhere.
Good, yeah.
So it's a case of once you realize that it can get better, then you you make a decision, you stick with that decision, and you push yourself to get out of the situation.
Good advice, man. That's a good way to end, I think.
Cheers.
So I just want to say thank you for sharing everything that you've gone through and your experiences through your time. Thank you so much for that. And also thank you for your time, because your time is precious. It is to everybody. So thank you for your time as well.
No, mate, thank you. It's been really good to catch up after quite some time.
Yeah. And has this been good going through everything? Because it's quite a lot of things.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was so much.
But it's been good for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. And lastly, thank you for your service.
No, absolutely. You're probably the same as me. If I don't do it, someone else will. So I may as well make sure it's done properly.
Very good. Yeah, big-headed as always. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Gareth.
Cheers, mate.
This has been Military Veterans Podcast. Out.